The chamber is open and full of whispers.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. September the 1st, 1991. The Great Hall of Hogwarts has held 10,000 sortings. It has watched 10,000 children walk through its doors and become something. Tonight, it will watch something else entirely. The enchanted ceiling is doing what it always does on the 1st of September. Rolling with slow autumn cloud, a few stars sharp between the gaps, the light of 100 floating candles catching the faces of 400 students who have been here long enough to pretend they don't care. The longhouse tables gleam with silverware and empty goblets, and the particular anticipation that smells like new robes and nerves and candle smoke. Hermione Granger has memorized the ceiling already. She memorized it the moment she walked in. She is 11 years old, and she has read Hogwarts: A History 3 times. Cover, appendices, footnotes, and the small errata page that most people mistake for a blank, and she knows that the ceiling is not a window. It is a complex meteorological charm cast by Rowena Ravenclaw's direct apprentice, modified 7 times over 9 centuries, that tracks actual sky conditions over the valley in real time. She knows this, and it still takes her breath away, and she will never admit to either of those things. She is sitting at the front of the first-year group, which is assembled in a cluster near the staff table, waiting. Her robes are exactly the right length. Her hair is doing what her hair always does, which is to say it is doing whatever it wants. She has decided she does not care about her hair tonight. She has decided she wants Gryffindor. She has decided this methodically, cross-referencing the qualities of each house against her own assessment of her character, and Gryffindor is the correct answer. The Sorting Hat sits on a stool. It is older looking than she expected, more patched, more real. She had imagined something theatrical. Instead, it looks like something a farmer might have left in a barn and forgotten for 6 centuries, which is not far from the truth. A thin boy with round glasses is standing 2 places to her left. She has noticed him before. On the boats, crossing the lake, he was the one who looked at the castle not with fear or excitement, but with a kind of grave attention, as if he was marking something. As if the castle was something to be understood, not admired. She had thought, that is an interesting way to look at something for the first time. She has not spoken to him. Professor McGonagall calls names from the scroll, and the sorting begins. Abbott, Hannah, 4 seconds, Hufflepuff. Bones, Susan, Hufflepuff. Boot, Terry, Ravenclaw, and Hermione notes this with professional acknowledgement. She had expected it. Brocklehurst, Mandy, Ravenclaw. Brown, Lavender, Gryffindor. Her name is called. She walks forward. She sits. The hat descends. It speaks immediately, which surprises her. She had expected it to deliberate longer. Interesting, it says, and its voice is not one voice. It is layered, composite, something old reading something present. Very interesting. Brilliant, certainly. The most thorough mind I've sorted in a number of years. But you already know that, don't you? You knew it before you sat down. The question is what you do with it. Gryffindor. Ah, the hat says, you want to be brave, not just clever. You've decided that being the brightest in the room is less important to you than being the one who acts when acting is required. That is genuinely unusual in someone with your gifts. That's not Ravenclaw thinking, that's yes, yes. Gryffindor, it shouts. The Gryffindor table erupts. She walks to it and sits and smooths her robes and watches the next several sortings with attention. And somewhere in her chest there is a warmth she does not have a clinical name for. So she files it under satisfactory outcome and watches the scroll. Longbottom, Neville. The hat takes nearly a full minute. Gryffindor. The boy looks like he might faint from relief. She claps for him. Malfoy, Draco. The hat barely settles before it calls Slytherin, and the pale boy with the sharp face is already moving before the word is finished, as if the outcome was always administrative. More names, more sortings. The hall settles into rhythm, then Potter, Harry. The Great Hall of Hogwarts has heard that name before, not from the scroll, not spoken aloud in these walls, but it lives in the stones of this place the way certain names always do, names that arrived with weight attached. The older students straighten. The whispers begin immediately, the cascade of it moving through the tables like wind across water. Potter, Harry Potter. Is that him? That's him. The boy with the round glasses and the grave attention walks forward. He walks the way he was looking at the castle, as if he is noting landmarks, not performing. He sits. The sorting hat is placed on his head. And then the candles go out. Not all of them, But 12? The 12 closest to the staff table, the oldest of the floating candles, the ones that have burned in this hall for centuries, gutter simultaneously as if exhaled. The enchanted ceiling ripples. Not with weather. The stars visible between the clouds blur slightly, a shimmer moving across the surface of the charm, a tremor in something that does not tremble. The great hall goes absolutely still. Hermione Granger feels it before she understands it. Every hair on both her arms stands upright in the same moment, a precise and total response, and she looks down at them with the expression she normally reserves for equations that don't balance, attention sharpened to a point, the part of her brain that catalogs anomalies firing hard. That is not a draft, she thinks. That is not a spell misfiring. That is something I don't have a category for. The Sorting Hat does not speak to Harry Potter privately. It opens its brim wide, wider than Hermione has ever read of it doing, and it speaks to the room. The voice is not what it was when it spoke to her. When it spoke to her, it was layered, intimate, one old consciousness addressing one young one. This is different. This is not a voice that is speaking to people. It is a voice that is speaking to stone, to foundation, to the enchantments woven into the mortar of a 1,000-year-old school. It resonates in the chest cavity. It resonates in the floor. Twin core resonance. No one breathes. A DYAD in magic. At the Gryffindor table, Percy Weasley's quill rolls off the edge and clatters on the floor. He does not pick it up. He is staring at the hat with the expression of a boy whose entire framework for how things work is developing a crack down the middle. First in 500 years. His robes are deep purple, his beard is silver, his half-moon spectacles catch the light of the remaining candles, and he rises with the practiced ease of a man who has held authority in this room for 50 years and knows precisely how to hold it. His voice is warm, measured, the voice of someone diffusing. "My dear Hat," he says, "while this is most remarkable, surely we might discuss the precise implications of—" The Hat turns toward him. Every portrait in the Great Hall later will describe this the same way. It turned, not twisted, not was moved. It turned, on its own, toward Albus Dumbledore, the way a person turns toward someone who has spoken out of turn. "You do not instruct the Founder's instrument, Albus." The silence that follows this sentence is a different quality of silence than the one before it. The previous silence was shock. This silence is reckoning. Professor McGonagall's quill snaps clean in half. She does not look down at it. The hat continues, and now its voice has returned to something that can be processed by human ears, but not by much. The resonance between the magical core of Harry James Potter and that of Hermione Jean Granger constitutes a sovereign pairing. This bond is recognized under Founders Era statute as a designation superseding standard sorting protocol. Harry Potter will not be placed in any of the 4 houses. He is to be seated at a neutral table, alongside his resonant counterpart, until the Wisengamot can be convened on the matter. This is not a suggestion. This is what the magic says. Nobody moves for 4 seconds. 4 full seconds of 400 people not moving. Then the hall erupts. Hermione Granger is already standing. She is standing because she processed the words Hermione Jean Granger at the normal speed her brain processes words, which is faster than most people, and she has done the immediate calculation that whatever just happened is either an error, which seems structurally unlikely given that the Sorting Hat is a founder-created artifact with 900 years of operational history and essentially no documented malfunctions, or it is not an error, which means it is real, which means she needs to understand it immediately. She does not understand it. This is not a common experience for her, and she does not enjoy it. Harry Potter is standing too, the hat still half around his head, looking into the chaos of the hall with that same grave attention. He lifts the hat off himself carefully, sets it on the stool, and looks around for somewhere to go. Their eyes meet across 12 feet of stone floor. He walks toward the staff table. She walks toward the staff table. They arrive at the small, unused side table, dust on the cloth positioned between the staff table and the Gryffindor table, as if it has always been waiting for something that never showed up. At the same moment, from different directions, and they sit down across from each other. He says, "I don't know what that was." She says, "Neither do I yet." She keeps Hogwarts, a history in a pocket enlarged with a stretching charm she taught herself in August from her parents' one magical theory book, an old, poorly translated text that she has since identified as largely inaccurate, but accurate enough for one useful thing. She opens the book to the index and scans it with her finger. "I have read this 3 times, she says, not looking up, and there is no entry for sovereign pairing. No entry for twin core resonance. Her finger stops moving. She looks up, which means either it has been removed from the official record, actively redacted, or it hasn't happened since before this edition was written. When was this edition written? She turns to the publication page, 1954, and the one before that. She pauses, looks at him properly for the first time. That's actually a very good question, she says. At the staff table, Dumbledore has sat back down. He is holding a lemon drop between two fingers and he has not eaten it. He is looking at the two children at the small table. His expression is the kind of expression that takes years to construct, the kind that tells you nothing useful about what the person is actually thinking. Beside him, McGonagall is collecting the pieces of her quill with precise, controlled movements. She is not looking at anyone. At the Gryffindor table, a red-haired boy named Ron Weasley has turned to his twin brothers and said something. Both twins look at the small table, then at each other, then back at the small table. One of them says something that makes the other one laugh, short and sharp, in the particular way that means they have just realized something is going to be very interesting. At the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy is very still. He is looking at Harry Potter with an expression that has replaced whatever expression he came in wearing. It is not contempt, it is not admiration, it is the expression of someone who has just been handed a problem they were not prepared to have. Somewhere in the Albanian forests, in a dark space between the trees, something stirs, a presence that is barely a presence. A thing that thinks in fragments and spite and survival, that has been waiting and calculating and barely holding itself together for 10 years. It does not know words for what it has just felt in the magical world. It has no category for it. What it knows is this: the world shifted. Something was proclaimed, and the proclamation was not for it. For the first time in 10 years, it is not certain what the future looks like. Back in the Great Hall, the sorting continues. 8 more children are sorted, and the hall slowly reconstructs its ability to pretend that everything is normal. The feast will come, the food will appear, the night will proceed. At the small table, Hermione Granger has pulled out a notebook and written 4 words at the top of a fresh page. What happened before 1954? She underlines it twice. Harry Potter watches her write and says nothing. But for the first time since he walked into this hall, since he walked into this world, honestly, since he walked onto platform 9 3/4, and discovered that something enormous was waiting for him on the other side of a wall, he does not feel like the only person in the room who understands that something enormous is happening. The map is open. Neither of them knows yet where it leads. October arrives at Hogwarts the way it always does, without asking permission, turning the grounds copper and cold overnight, the lake going dark and still under skies that have decided they are done with warmth for the year. The small table is still there. No one has moved it, no one has addressed it officially. It appeared in the space between the staff table and Gryffindor's long bench, and it is there every morning when the hall fills and every evening when it empties. And the first years have stopped staring at it the way they stared in September. Because first years adapt faster than anyone gives them credit for, and because Hogwarts itself seems to have simply accepted the arrangement, the way very old things accept new facts, not with enthusiasm but with a kind of stone patience. Harry and Hermione sit there for every meal. Ron Weasley sits across from them, uninvited, as of the 3rd morning of term. He arrived with a plate of toast, sat down, looked at both of them with the frank appraisal of someone who has grown up with 6 siblings and therefore cannot be made uncomfortable by unusual situations, and said, "Right so. What are you two, exactly?" Neither of them had an answer. He had stayed anyway. The institutional problem presented itself immediately. McGonagall and Flitwick were assigned within the first week of term to design an alternative arrangement for the duo's practical instruction. The 4-house classroom structure assumes single-caster exercises, individual assessment, a contained magical environment. What it does not assume is 2 students whose magic, when operating in proximity, does something the textbooks have no entry for. The charms lesson is where they find out. It is the 3rd week of October. The first years are attempting Wingardium Leviosa, the first proper levitation work, the feather on the desk, the swish and flick, the careful extension of will through a wand into a piece of down. Flitwick has demonstrated it 4 times. The class is attempting it with varying degrees of success. Lavender Brown gets her feather 2 inches off the desk and squeaks. Neville's feather twitches and goes still. Ron's feather levitates and immediately begins spinning in a slow circle, which is not technically correct but is, Flitwick notes, quite impressive for a first attempt. Harry and Hermione, sitting 2 desks apart as arranged, lift their wands at the same moment. It is not coordinated. There is no signal. They simply both reach the point of readiness at the same instant, which is already unusual, and they both cast. Both feathers lift. They rise at identical speeds, to identical heights, and then, in the space between the two desks, they meet. They do not collide. They press together, point to point, and stay there. A faint light appears at the junction, not bright, not dramatic, the precise pale gold of a candle flame seen through frosted glass. The fused feathers rotate once, twice, in a slow and deliberate arc, and then they descend together, gently, and settle back onto Hermione's desk. The classroom is quiet. Professor Flitwick is standing on his stack of books with his mouth slightly open. He closes it. He opens it again. "Outstanding," he says to both of them, before he can stop himself. "Both of you. Outstanding." Then, more quietly, adjusting his spectacles, "I wonder if we might—" Yes, I think perhaps a different arrangement might be yes. What they discover about themselves does not arrive all at once. It comes in pieces, the way most true things do. A fragment here, a correction there, understanding building sideways rather than straight up. Hermione discovers the first piece in the library. She is working through the theory of Wingardium Leviosa, not because she needs to. She has already mastered it, but because she wants to understand why the synchronized casting produced a different result than individual casting. And understanding why requires understanding the underlying mechanics, and understanding the underlying mechanics requires a stack of books she has been working through since the third morning of term. She is on her fourth book when she feels it. It is not a feeling she has language for. The closest she can come, in the notation she keeps in her private journal, is structural clarity. When Harry is not in the room, the magical theory she is working through feels the way it always has: accessible, logical, requiring effort. When Harry enters the library, which he does 20 minutes into her session, shaking leaves from his hair from whatever he has been doing outside, the theory does not become easier exactly. It becomes louder, more available, as if someone turned up the resolution on something she was already seeing clearly. She watches him find a seat 3 tables away. She looks back at her book. The paragraph she has been rereading for 6 minutes resolves immediately. She writes in her journal, "His instinctual magic creates something in the ambient field, a frequency. I can almost feel it as structure, like a tuning fork. More investigation required." Harry discovers his piece during flying practice. Madame Hooch runs the first-year flying lessons on the grounds, and Harry discovers almost immediately that he is natural on a broom. Not trained, not practiced, simply natural. The way some people are natural at running or at reading, the way it feels like remembering rather than learning. He stays after the lesson, alone, flying low loops over the practice pitch in the gray October afternoon. Hermione is not there. She is in the library. She is 300 meters away and 2 floors up, and he cannot see her, and she cannot see him. But at approximately the same time she is reading the paragraph that finally resolves, his broom responds to a banking correction with a precision he has never achieved before. Not faster, not more powerful, more intentional, as if the instinct that usually drives his flying has been given a framework. He does not understand this. He lands, stands in the cold, and stares at the castle in the direction of the library. He writes nothing. He is not a person who writes things down. He tells Ron. Ron thinks about this for approximately 30 seconds and says, "So she makes your magic smarter and you make her magic stronger?" "I don't know if that's exactly. That's what you said." The discovery that changes everything happens in December, in the evenings after supper, when the castle has gone quiet and the common rooms are loud with chess and gossip and homework panic, and 2 first years have found that the small 5th table after the meal service ends is entirely private. They have been running informal exercises, not assigned, not supervised, entirely self-designed, which is itself unusual for 2 11-year-olds, and entirely characteristic of these particular 2. Harry casts simple spells. Hermione monitors the theoretical output. She has been constructing a notation system for this, columns in her journal, patterns she has begun to detect. On the 14th of December, Harry is tired. This is not a metaphor. He has had Quidditch practice in the wind and cold, and Professor Snape's practical examination in potions in the same afternoon, and his magical reserves. A real mechanic. Hermione has confirmed this through her reading. The body's capacity to channel magic is finite and depletes with use, particularly in children still developing their core, or genuinely low. He sits down at the table, puts his head on his arms, and tells her the session needs to wait. Hermione is frustrated. She has been looking forward to this session since Tuesday, and she does not deal with disruptions to planned work with particular grace. She reaches across the table and grabs his forearm, intending to shake him alert. Both of them go still. Something moves between them. The word moves is not quite right, but there is no better word in any language she has studied yet. It travels the contact point, her hand on his arm, and it is not emotional, not invasive, not warm in any sentimental sense. It is equalizing, the way water moves through a connecting tube between two vessels at different levels, not choosing to, not trying to, simply obeying a physical principle that requires it. She is giving him something. She can feel it leaving, he can feel it arriving. When she lets go, 4 seconds later, Harry sits up straight. He is alert. His eyes are clear. His magical reserves, she will later confirm through their notation system, have returned to a functional level. Hermione is slightly tired in a way that has nothing to do with the hour. They stare at each other across the table. "What," says Harry, "was that?" "I don't know yet," Hermione says. Her voice is precise, but there is something underneath it. Not fear, not quite. The feeling of standing on the edge of a map where the known territory ends. She opens her journal to a fresh page. She writes at the top, "Mana transfer, Deck 14, contact required, directional, involuntary." She underlines involuntary and then, after a moment, underlines it again. "It wasn't something I did," she says, more to herself than to him. "It wasn't a spell. I didn't intend it. The contact created a circuit. The energy went where it was needed." She pauses. That is not how magic is supposed to work. Is it dangerous? She considers this honestly. "I don't know. I need more data." She looks at him. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to not dismiss it because it sounds strange." "Everything about this is strange." "Yes, but this is specifically strange." She closes the journal. "I've been tracking a frequency disruption near Professor Quirrell. I started in November. Every time you're near him, your scar, the way you react to him, it isn't random." She speaks carefully, each word chosen. "The scar is not just a scar. I suspect, and I want to be precise about this, it is not yet confirmed, that it carries a magical signature, and that signature may be reacting to something in Quirrell that has the same origin point." She pauses. "The same origin as whatever killed your parents." Harry is very still. "I'm not certain," she says. "I am tracking it. What I can say with certainty is that Quirrell is not just Quirrell. Something else is in him. And whatever it is, whatever is using him, it is looking for something in this school." The page is filled with notations, dates, times, scar reaction intensities logged by Harry's own description, over 6 weeks of asking him how he felt in Quirrell's presence, triangulated against Quirrell's documented movements through the castle. The pattern is clear and directional and points unambiguously toward the 3rd floor. Harry looks at the notations for a long time. He looks up. "You've been building this since November," he says. "Since October," she corrects. November is when the pattern became undeniable. Not comfort exactly, the specific relief of a person who has been carrying a weight alone and has just found that someone else had already noticed the weight and had been quietly building the infrastructure to deal with it. "What do we do?" he says. "We keep watching," Hermione says. "We keep noting. We don't act until we understand what we're looking at. Acting without understanding is how people get killed in stories and in reality." She takes her journal back. "And we tell Ron. Ron, he can go places we can't without drawing attention." She pauses. "We are, whether we like it or not, the 2 most conspicuous first years in this school. Ron is ordinary, that is going to be extraordinarily useful." The year turns. January, February, March. The investigation sharpens. The sessions at the small table multiply, deepen, develop a structure that is neither formal nor casual, but something in between, the working rhythm of 2 people who have discovered they think better in each other's presence and have simply accepted this as an operational fact. By April, Hermione's notation system has mapped the sovereign field. She has not named it that yet. That comes later, with enough precision to identify Quirrell's movements as deliberate, progressive, and aimed. Whatever is on the 3rd floor, he is working toward it. Whatever he is not going to stop. They go through the trapdoor together when the time comes. Naturally. Without discussion, without a plan that excludes either of them, because the idea of approaching this separately has not once occurred to either of them, and this itself, the absolute organic impossibility of separation in a crisis, is something Hermione adds to her journal that night in the hospital wing. They are both there, both conscious, both already arguing about what comes next before Madame Pomfrey has finished checking their vitals. The bond saved them. They are only beginning to understand what the bond is. September the 2nd, 1992. The Great Hall at breakfast. The small table is where it always is. Hermione has a new journal. The old one, filled cover to cover with frequency notations, behavioral maps, a 7-page section on the Quirrell incident written the night after they left the hospital wing, is in her trunk, sealed. This one is blank. She opens it to the first page and writes, one line at the top, Year 2, the field is active, something is already wrong. Harry looks up from his eggs. You can feel it too? Since the train, she says. She had felt it on the Hogwarts Express in the last hour before arrival. Not pain, not fear, the frequency disruption she had spent year 1 cataloging, the thing her notation system had learned to read as foreign soul signature in proximity. Except this time it was not directional. It was not pointing toward a person across a room. It was diffuse, ambient, like a sound heard through walls before you can identify the source. She had looked at Harry. His scar was not hurting. That was important. The Quirrell-adjacent disruption had always triggered the scar, a direct response to something old and terrible being close. This was different. This was the same type of frequency, dark, soul-adjacent, occupied, without the scar response. A different object. She had written in her journal sitting in the train compartment while Ron played chess against himself. Same origin, different vessel, already inside our perimeter. She had spent the night thinking about the word vessel. They do not find the diary. The diary finds them, in the way that designed things find their targets. Through patience and proximity and the exploitation of vulnerability, it spent years being optimized to identify. What they find instead is Ginny Weasley. Ron notices first, which is how it should be. He is her brother, and brothers who pay attention, even when paying attention is inconvenient, notice things that outside observers miss. He notices in October that she is tired in a way that is not schedule tired or homesick tired. He notices that she flinches at loud sounds. He notices that she is doing her homework on the same parchment twice, the second time over the ghost of the first, as if she cannot remember writing it. He brings it to the table at breakfast on a Thursday, setting his plate down with more force than usual. Hermione is already writing. I know. Since when have you noticed? Since, how do you know? The frequency disruption is strongest in proximity to her. It has been for 6 weeks. I've been watching. She sets down her quill. She has something, Ron. An object, dark, soul-adjacent, the same signature type as what was in Quirrell last year, but more coherent, more present. Whatever it is, it's not just emanating, it's communicating. Ron's jaw sets in the specific way it sets when he is absorbing something terrible and processing it as a problem to be solved, rather than a feeling to be felt. Communicating with her, through her, possibly both. Harry has not said anything. He is watching the Gryffindor table from across the room, watching Ginny push food around a plate she has not eaten from, and his expression is the same one he had when Hermione showed him the Quirrell notation in December of year 1. Recognition and wait. The understanding that something bad is already in motion. We need to find the object, Harry says. We need to find it carefully, Hermione says. If she's been writing in it, if there's been sustained contact, she may not know what she's carrying. Confronting her directly risks triggering the object's defense response. We approach her gently. We explain what we think is happening. We give her the choice to hand it over. And if she can't, Ron says, if it's already got enough of a hold that she can't just hand it over. Hermione picks up her quill. She writes 2 words in the new journal. Extraction protocol. She looks at them, then at Ron. Then we build one, she says. The resonance compass is built in November in the space of 4 evenings, using principles Hermione extracts from 3 different texts she has permission to access through the Sovereign Status Arrangement, an ancient arithmancy primer, a treatise on directional detection spells, and a privately circulated manuscript on ambient dark frequency mapping that Dumbledore released to her with a particular expression she has catalogued as controlled concern. It is not a physical compass in the traditional sense. It is a piece of parchment, 12 inches square, covered in a runic array of Hermione's own design, that responds to proximity by mapping the intensity of the dark signal relative to their position. She calibrates it against Harry's scar response. His scar is a known frequency point, a fixed reference, and it takes her 2 attempts and a full evening of recalibration before it works the way she wants it to. When it works, it shows them exactly what she already suspected. The signal is strong near Ginny. It moves with Ginny. And it is getting stronger, it's feeding, Hermione says, in the library, voice low, the parchment between them. Harry looks at the notation. Feeding on what? Her magic, her memories, her... She pauses. The word she wants is one she found in a restricted text 3 weeks ago and has not yet brought herself to use aloud. Herself, she says. The object contains something that requires a living host to sustain its presence. It takes from her to maintain itself. When he speaks, his voice has the particular flatness of a person keeping their feelings exactly where they will not interfere with clear thinking. We get it away from her, whatever it takes. Yes, Hermione says. The dueling club happens in December, the way things happen in institutional settings, announced, organized, and immediately indicative of exactly why the announcement should not have been made. Lockhart presides over it with the confidence of a man who has confused personal publicity with practical competence, and Snape watches from the side of the room with an expression that contains several distinct layers of contempt stacked on top of each other. Harry is paired with Draco Malfoy. What happens next is documented in the journals of 17 first and second year students and will be discussed in this school for years. Draco conjures a snake. The snake writhes on the floor, angry, tracking toward Justin Finch Fletchley. Harry steps forward, raises his hand, and speaks. Not English, not any language that the majority of the room has ever heard. Something older, something that moves through the air with the specific quality of a thing that knows where it is going and does not require the approval of listeners. The snake stops, turns, listens. The room recoils. Hermione does not recoil. She steps forward. She pushes through the ring of students who have pressed back, and she arrives at Harry's side and she takes his arm. And she says quietly and precisely, "That's enough." To Harry, not to the room. The snake registers her proximity, recalculates, and retreats. Snape banishes it with a wave. In the noise that follows, the accusations, the staring, the word parcel mouth spreading through the room like a lit fuse, Hermione steers Harry out of the hall and into the corridor before anyone can organize a sustained reaction. "Look at me," she says when they are in the corridor when the door has closed behind them. He looks at her. "That was not dark magic," she says. "It was rare, it was startling, it is not the same thing." She says it with the precision of someone who has done the research and is delivering findings, not offering comfort. Parcel mouth ability is an ancient magical inheritance. The Slytherin line carried it. It does not corrupt the speaker. It does not indicate anything about your character. It is a language. She pauses. "I found a reference to it in a restricted text in October. I've been noting it as potentially relevant." Harry says, after a moment, "You found a reference in October. I find a lot of references. Most of them are relevant eventually." She releases his arm. "The important thing is this. You can communicate with snakes. The basilisk in this school, because there is a basilisk in this school, the petrifications are consistent with a creature that kills through direct eye contact and paralyzes through indirect, which narrows it to 3 possible species and the size of the victim's incapacitation points, specifically to a basilisk. The basilisk responds to Parseltongue commands. That is an asset. I needed more data before I was certain." They find the chamber in January. The resonance compass recalibrated one final time leads them to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, to the sink with the serpent on the tap, to the pipe that opens when Harry speaks to it in the language it was designed to recognize. They go in together. Lockhart follows them because Ron, holding him at one point in the corridor outside with an expression of absolute implacable Weasley stubbornness, has allowed him no alternative. When Lockhart attempts his memory charm, the reflexive self-preservation move of a man whose entire career has been constructed from stealing other people's stories, it does not land cleanly. The charm finds 2 targets in its range, and the sovereign field between them is not a single magical signature. It is a composite, a frequency that the charm cannot parse into individual targets. It disperses. Lockhart staggers. Ron takes his wand with the quiet efficiency of someone who has been waiting for exactly this. Harry and Hermione descend. The chamber is cathedral dark. Stone serpents and standing water and something very old at the far end. Something very cold. Something that does not breathe the way living things breathe. Ginny is on the floor, not dead. The compass shows her frequency as suppressed, muted, the way a voice sounds when it is speaking from the bottom of a well. The object has taken enough of her to make itself almost fully present. Tom Riddle stands over her with Harry's wand, not yet having it, reaching for it, and he looks up when they enter, and his expression is the one worn by someone whose plan has accounted for everything except the specific variable now standing in his way. 2, he says. He looks at Hermione. That's unexpected. Most things about us are, she says. Tom Riddle is 16 years old and brilliant, and has been practicing his presence in a diary for 50 years. And none of that is sufficient preparation for Hermione Granger speaking to him as though he is a problem she has already solved. What follows is not a duel in the traditional sense. Tom Riddle is powerful. The memory of him, the echo of what he was at 16, is genuinely formidable. He commands the basilisk in Parseltongue, directing it toward Harry. And this is where the strategy matters. This is where the preparation matters. This is where 6 weeks of building toward this moment pays its debt. Hermione is his eyes. She has inscribed reflective charms on every viable surface during the descent. The standing water, polished sections of stone she prepared with a mirror surface enchantment she designed herself, using principles drawn from basic light redirection theory that Flitwick covered in November. The chamber walls, the water, the curved stone surfaces all carry the effect. The basilisk's image reflects everywhere except in Harry's direct line of sight. Left, she says. Calm, factual, 20 feet, coming along the eastern wall. Harry moves. The sword, Gryffindor's sword, which arrives in his hand from the sorting hat he has been carrying since he descended. Because Hermione had read that Gryffindor's sword would come to any true Gryffindor in need, and had therefore placed the hat in his hands before they entered the pipe, finds its angle. The basilisk falls. The fang goes through the diary, the dark frequency in Hermione's notation system, which she has carried in her mind for 4 months, which she has tracked and mapped and studied. It does not fade, it does not diminish gradually, it tears. It is the specific sensation of a signal being cut mid-transmission, a standing wave destabilized at its source, and the feedback moves through the sovereign field like a sound played at the exact wrong pitch for the instrument. Both of them feel it. Harry drops to one knee. Hermione gets to him in 3 steps, one hand on his shoulder, and the mana transfer that started as an accident in December of year 1 happens deliberately for the first time. She pushes stability into the contact point, grounds the feedback, keeps him upright. Ginny opens her eyes. Hermione looks at the destroyed diary on the floor, the fang through it, the ink bleeding out from the puncture like something that had been held under pressure for 50 years, black and spreading, and then nothing. Just a ruined book. Just paper and leather and the ghost of a frequency she will never forget. She crouches down and she looks at the remains of it, and she says nothing for a long moment. She takes her journal from her robes. She turns to the frequency notation she recorded in year 1, the day she first identified the disruption around Quirrell. She compares it to her most recent entry, the same origin point, the same base frequency, 2 objects, same maker, same soul. She writes, not the only one. She underlines it, then she writes beneath it, how many? Harry, recovered, reads over her shoulder. He does not ask her to explain. He reads what she has written, and he nods once, slowly, and that is enough. Dumbledore, when he comes, and he comes quickly, too quickly, with the specific speed of a man who was already watching, looks at them both for a long moment. He looks at the diary, at the notation Hermione is making, at the frequency map she is building from memory in real time, her hand moving with the focused precision of someone documenting evidence before it degrades. His expression is one she does not yet have a name for, the look of a man whose long game has just encountered a variable that is moving faster than he planned for. He knows what she is building toward. She has known since January that he knows. Neither of them says it yet. The word for what the diary was, the technical term, the true name for the thing she has been tracking, is in the restricted text she has not yet been granted access to. She will find a way in. She always does. She closes the journal. She has what she needs. Number 12 is not a house that welcomes people. It is a house that tolerates them, the way a very old and very proud thing tolerates the presence of those it has not yet decided to destroy. The entrance hall is dark wood and darker portraits, and a smell of age that has graduated past mustiness into something almost geological, the smell of a place that has been important for so long that importance itself has become a sediment in the walls. Sirius Black has been free for 6 weeks. He moves through the house the way a man moves through a space he grew up hating and cannot stop loving. Quickly, in straight lines, touching nothing. He has repainted the kitchen, He has not touched anything else. The portrait of Walburga Black in the entrance hall has been silenced with the opposing principle of a permanent sticking charm. Not removed, because it cannot be removed, but muffled, the mouth still moving, the sound arriving at no one. He walks past it every morning and does not look at it. This is, Hermione has noted in her journal, a form of discipline that deserves more credit than it receives. Harry and Hermione have been here since the third day of summer. Dumbledore had objected, quietly, carefully, with the specific gentleness of a man who is used to his objections being received as wisdom rather than preference. He had concerns about security. He had concerns about exposure. He had a great many concerns that all pointed, if you followed them far enough, toward the same destination. Harry, isolated, manageable, progressing toward a future Dumbledore had designed without Harry's knowledge or input. Sirius had listened to every concern with the patience of a man who spent 12 years in Azkaban and is therefore immune to discomfort. Then he had said, very pleasantly, "He's my godson, Albus. The sovereign designation gives him legal standing to choose his own residence during non-term periods, and he's chosen here." Dumbledore had looked at Harry. Harry had said nothing. He had not needed to. Sirius teaches them about inheritance on a Tuesday evening in June, at the kitchen table, with 3 cups of tea and a map of the Wisengamot's chamber layout that he has drawn from memory on the back of a ministry notice. "Your father knew this," he says to Harry first. Always first, with Sirius, the acknowledgement that James Potter existed and was specific and is worth knowing about. He didn't use it the way he could have. He thought the political machinery was less important than the magical work. He was wrong, and he knew it by the end. And I think he would have changed course. He stops, sets down his quill. "The point is that the seat is yours. House Potter. House Black once I formally transfer the lordship. 2 Wizengamot seats at 14 years old. The Emancipation Statute," Hermione says. She has already found it. She found it in March, in the restricted section 3 weeks before the end of term, in a legal compendium from 1743 that had not been properly reshelved after the last time someone accessed it, 1962, according to the card in the sleeve. Founders Era provision. A lord of an ancient house recognized by a founder-created artifact is legally an adult in all Wizengamot proceedings. The Hat's declaration wasn't just ceremonial. It activated standing law that the ministry has never repealed because it's never been relevant. How long have you known about that? Since March. You've been sitting on it since March. I was verifying the secondary precedents. I wanted to be certain before I raised it. She pulls a 12-page document from the folder she brought to the table. I'm certain now. I had a solicitor review it in May. She confirmed the reading. She's available to file the formal recognition motion whenever we're ready. Sirius takes the document. He reads the first page. He reads the second page. He sets it down and looks at Harry with an expression that contains, in roughly equal parts, pride and something that might be the specific grief of a man recognizing that the children in front of him have been doing serious work in the absence of the adults who should have been helping them. James would have been. He stops again, clears his throat. Right, so, the seats. What do you want to do with them? Harry looks at Hermione. Hermione has a second document ready. The Marauders map arrives in August, from Fred and George Weasley, in a package with no note and a great deal of trust. They had kept it since their first year at Hogwarts, retrieved from Filch's confiscation cabinet, and they send it now without conditions because conditions are not the language of that particular transaction. They send it because it is useful and because Harry and Hermione will use it well. Hermione studies it for 3 hours before she lets Harry touch it. The enchantments on this are extraordinary, she says, holding it to the light of the kitchen window. 4 casters, complementary magical signatures, each one contributed a different layer, the cartography, the tracking, the concealment, the activation sequence. She pauses. Your father made this. Harry, across the table, is very still. He and Sirius and Lupin and... She does not finish that sentence. Pettigrew has not yet been caught. The name sits badly in the room, which is the room of the man he betrayed, and she lets it be unfinished. The point is that the magical architecture here is genuinely sophisticated. It's gray, by the way. The tracking charms, the way they read intention rather than location, that's not a light technique that's older than the light/dark classification. That's the Marauders, Sirius says from the doorway, leaning against the frame with a mug of tea, watching her hold his best friend's work to the light. His voice is careful. James understood that the binary was political. He grew up pure blood. He was taught the light/dark framework from birth. and he spent 5 years at Hogwarts figuring out that the framework was a story someone told to make their particular kind of power seem inevitable. He pauses. He was better at understanding it than explaining it. Lily was the one who could explain it. Sirius sets down his mug. He pulls out a chair. He sits. He teaches them for 3 weeks. 2 tracks running parallel, the way the duo themselves run parallel. Distinct but interdependent, each informing the other. Track 1 is house lore, the Wizengamot's architecture, its history, the specific weight of an ancient house seat versus a ministry-appointed seat, the way votes accumulate and fracture, the families and their alignments and the gaps between public position and private dealing. Harry absorbs this differently than Hermione does. She builds it as a structure, a diagram, nodes, and connections. He builds it as a set of people, faces, and motivations, the political machinery understood through the humans operating it. Sirius watches them process the same information in their different ways and says, "One evening, that's why it works. She sees the board, you see the players. You need both." Track 2 is the Grey tradition. This takes longer to teach because it requires first dismantling something that has been presented as immutable. The light-dark split, Sirius says, on the first evening of this track is 50 years old, 60 at the outside. Grindelwald invented it as a political tool. Or rather, he took an existing aesthetic preference and turned it into an ideology. And then Dumbledore defeated him on those terms and the framework calcified. Good versus evil, light versus dark. Anyone who doesn't fit into either category becomes invisible or dangerous, or both. But magic isn't 50 years old, Harry says. No, magic is as old as consciousness, and the oldest magic, the magic in Hogwarts foundations, the magic in the hat, the magic in your lordship rings, the magic the Peverills used, none of it cares about the binary. It predates the binary. It was Grey before Grey had a name, because before Grindelwald there was no need for the name. Hermione has her journal open. She is writing with the focused speed of someone taking dictation from their own thoughts. So the founders built Grey. Gryffindor and Slytherin together, Sirius says. Think about what it means that those two built the same school, the 2 poles of the modern binary, and they built a single institution. The hat they made is Grey. It reads character without moral classification. The school's enchantments are Grey. They protect everyone inside, not just the virtuous. The architecture of this place is Grey at its foundations, and then 500 years of politics laid other things on top of it, and people stopped seeing what was underneath. Hermione stops writing. She looks up. The hat's declaration, she says slowly. The sovereign pairing, it didn't just recognize us. It activated something. A Grey protocol written into the school's original architecture that's been dormant because the conditions for it hadn't been met in 500 years. Sirius meets her eyes. Yes. So when Dumbledore said he couldn't override it because it wasn't his to override. He is the headmaster of a school. He is not the school. The school is Gryffindor and Slytherin and Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff and whatever they agreed to build together in the year 993. And what they agreed to build in the Grey tradition includes provisions that Albus Dumbledore's light framework mind did not anticipate and cannot supersede. The kitchen is quiet for a moment. Harry says, "He doesn't like that." "No," Sirius says. "He doesn't. Albus is a good man. I want to be clear about that because it matters. What he is a good man with a specific kind of blindness. The blindness that comes from being brilliant inside a framework for so long that the framework stops feeling like a framework and starts feeling like reality." He picks up his mug. The greater good requires a framework in which good and bad are clearly separable and a sufficiently wise person can adjudicate between them. The Grey tradition says that no person is sufficiently wise, that the adjudication belongs to the magic itself. Hermione writes this down word for word. Her realization comes on the last evening of August, in the kitchen at Grimmauld Place, with the window open to the London night, and Harry reading across the table and Sirius somewhere upstairs, making the specific sounds of a person reorganizing a room they have been avoiding for weeks. She has been reading the arithmetic notation she built for the sovereign field, the space between, as she has come to think of it, the third thing that exists when they work together. She has been reading it and comparing it to the Grey magic framework Sirius has been teaching, and something has been assembling itself in the back of her mind for 3 days, and she has been waiting for it to finish assembling before she looked directly at it. Now she looks directly at it. "Harry," she says. He looks up. "Dumbledore wants the light to win," she says. "That is his sincere, genuine, deep desire. He has organized 40 years of his life around it, and Voldemort wants the dark to win. That is his sincere, genuine desire, the thing that has survived death and corporeal dissolution and 12 years of Albanian forests. She pauses. Neither of them will accept what we are, not because we're enemies to either of them, because we're a third option, and third options are, to people who have invested everything in a binary, the most threatening thing that can exist. Harry sets down his book. Because if we win, he says slowly, then neither of them was right. Not just that, she taps the notation. If we win on gray terms, if the thing that ends Voldemort is not a light victory but a dissolution of the framework itself, then the entire history of the last 60 years has to be rewritten. The war, the sacrifices, the ideology, all of it was fought on a battlefield that didn't need to be a battlefield. That Grindelwald drew, and Dumbledore accepted, and everyone else inherited. She looks at him. That's not a neutral position we're in. It's a stronger one. But it means we're fighting both of their wars while refusing to fight either of them. And they will both, at different times and in different ways, try to pull us back into the binary. Dumbledore will do it gently, he says. Yes, and Voldemort will do it violently. The sovereign field, mapped in numbers and frequency readings and 3 years of careful observation. The third thing, the space between, our job, she says, is to be exactly what we are, consistently, under pressure, when it would be easier to pick a side. She closes the journal. That is going to be the hardest thing we ever do. Harry picks his book back up. Good thing we have Ron, he says. Hermione almost smiles. Good thing we have Ron, she agrees. Upstairs, Sirius drops something heavy, swears comprehensively in 3 languages, and the sound of it moves through the old house like something almost like laughter. September 1st is in 3 days. They are ready. The goblet of fire stands in the center of the entrance hall on the nights leading up to Halloween, and it is the most honest thing in the school. It does not care about reputation. It does not care about politics. It reads the magical signatures it receives, and it selects the best, and it records its selection with the absolute indifference of something that was built to be impartial and has been impartial for centuries without once finding this difficult. On the night of October the 31st, it produces 4 slips of paper instead of 3. The 4th slip reads, in the goblet's distinctive script, Harry Potter and Hermione Granger, Sovereign House. Dumbledore holds the slip for 11 seconds before he speaks. Hermione counts them. The legal problem is immediate and, from Hermione's perspective, clarifying. She has been watching Dumbledore's face since the slip emerged, not with hostility, with the attention she gives to all significant data sources. What she sees is a man processing a genuinely unexpected outcome and arriving within those 11 seconds at the same conclusion she reached in approximately 4 seconds. The goblet has read the sovereign designation and treated it as a single entry. 1 house, 1 champion. The contract, which is binding because the goblet's magic does not have an appeals process, covers both of them. He cannot separate them. He cannot disqualify them. He cannot invoke the age line because the age line did not prevent the entry, which means legally the goblet itself has determined that the sovereign pairing constitutes eligible standing. Barty Crouch Sr. arrives at this conclusion 12 seconds after Dumbledore and goes the color of old parchment. There is no precedent, he says. There is no precedent for a sovereign pairing either, Hermione says from the back of the small group of champions, and yet here we are. Crouch looks at her with the expression of a ministry official encountering a 14-year-old who is not behaving like a 14-year-old. It is a look she has received before. She holds it without difficulty. The contract is binding. Dumbledore says finally, quietly. The words land in the room with the weight of something irrevocable. His eyes move to Harry, then to Hermione, and what she reads in them is not anger. It is the specific resignation of a man watching a chessboard rearrange itself outside his reach. Cedric Diggory, to his credit, is the first person to speak after that. He looks at both of them and says, with the straightforward fairness that is simply native to him, congratulations. May the best champion or champions win. Fleur Delacour looks at them the way she looks at everything, assessingly through the frame of someone who has been assessed her entire life and has learned to make assessment reciprocal. Her eyes linger on the space between Harry and Hermione, the foot of air separating them, and something moves in her expression. Recognition, maybe. She is part Vila, and Vila magic is old and resonance sensitive, and whatever she detects in that foot of air, she files it away without comment. Victor Crumb says nothing. He watches them with the focused attention of a professional who has identified a serious competitor and is beginning to build a tactical read. Across the room, where the Death Eater in a good man's skin has been watching everything, Barty Crouch Jr., wearing Alastor Moody's face, carrying Alastor Moody's paranoia as a costume over his own, makes a rapid calculation. The plan called for 1 champion in the maze, 1 portkey, 1 sacrifice at the graveyard, 2 changes nothing about the ritual. The blood required is Harry's, and Harry will be there. The second presence is a variable, not a problem. He sends his master a message that night through the connection he maintains. He writes, both of them. What he does not write, because he does not understand it yet, is, and where one of them is, the other is already 3 moves ahead. The preparation for the first task begins the evening Fred and George Weasley appear in the corridor outside the Gryffindor common room, wearing the expressions of people delivering information they find both alarming and fascinating. Dragons, George says. 1 each, Fred says. Except in your case, George says, looking at both of them, presumably 1 between 2? Harry and Hermione are already walking back toward the common room. Thank you, Hermione says, without turning around. We know. They had known for 4 days. The resonance compass, recalibrated for creature-scale magical signatures rather than object-scale dark frequency, had been detecting the dragon's presence on the grounds since their arrival in warded enclosures north of the Forbidden Forest. She had not needed the twins' information. She had needed specifically the 45 minutes she and Harry had used the night before to design their approach. The approach takes 45 minutes because it is not complicated. It is not complicated because 3 years of synchronized casting practice has made the tactical question, how do 2 people whose magic amplifies in concert approach a problem that expects 1 person, almost routine, to answer? Harry is the executor. Hermione is the architect. The dragon expects 1 target. 2 targets is a problem the dragon will solve by choosing 1. And tracking it, the window between the choice and the tracking is approximately 4 seconds. 4 seconds is, for Harry on a broom and Hermione with a clear casting lane, sufficient. She writes it in her journal as a sequence. He reads the sequence once and nods. They do not practice it, they have been practicing it, in essence, since October of year 1. The arena on the morning of the first task holds, by Hermione's count, several hundred people who have come to watch children face dragons, which she finds more disturbing the more she thinks about it, and therefore thinks about it only as a logistical factor. A 5th dragon had been arranged for the unprecedented joint entry. A Hungarian horntail, the most dangerous of the 4 breeds present, transported at Crouch's insistence that the sovereign entry face equivalent challenge to any standard champion. It is 40 feet long, black-scaled, and it clocks 2 figures entering its enclosure with the immediate displeasure of a creature that takes territorial violation personally and has the means to do something about it. It tracks Harry first. He is moving broom-mounted, which means he is the more dynamic stimulus. This is exactly correct. Hermione, stationary at the enclosure's edge, raises her wand. The Confundus charm she casts is not standard. Standard Confundus operates on human-scale magical cognition. It introduces doubt, hesitation, mild directional confusion. A dragon's magical resistance is several orders of magnitude higher than a human's. Standard Confundus would land on the Hungarian horntail and produce, at best, a brief pause. What Hermione casts is the standard charm with 3 years of sovereign field amplification behind it. She does not consciously activate the resonance. She has never been able to consciously activate it on demand. It responds to genuine need, to the full deployment of her intent when Harry's safety is the stakes. It responds now. The charm leaves her wand with a diameter and penetration depth that Flitwick, watching from the judge's stand, will later describe in his private notes as structurally inconsistent with a 4th-year caster working alone. The Hungarian horntail stops tracking Harry. It stops tracking anything, briefly, because it is processing a sensory confusion it has never encountered, because nothing in its considerable years of experience has prepared it for a targeted magical frequency inversion applied to its threat-tracking faculty. 4 seconds. Harry has the golden egg from the nest in his hand before the dragon's tracking resumes. He is already above and away, the egg shrieking a secondary concern, the broom banking left, and Hermione is walking calmly toward the exit, because the task is complete, and standing in an enclosure with a reoriented dragon is poor risk management. 47 seconds total elapsed. The crowd's silence lasts 3 of those seconds before it becomes noise. The second task. February. The lake. They enter together, both having consumed gillyweed at the same moment, both adapting to the lake's cold with the specific mutual awareness that has become, over 4 years, as natural as breathing. The Mer people's village resolves out of the murk, and the hostages are where they are supposed to be, tied to a stone pillar, drifting in the current. Ron is there, and beside Ron, tied by the same enchantment, Hermione stops swimming when she sees this, which is a physiological error because stopping produces drag and cold, but she stops anyway, Ginny Weasley, tied next to Ron, Hermione's hostage. She had not. The thought catches in her chest in a way that is not standard logical processing, the feeling of someone who has spent 4 years cataloging the Sovereign Field's mechanics and has just encountered one of its mechanics in a form she did not anticipate. What the person would miss most, she thinks. That's what the enchantment took. Harry has already untied Ron. He is looking at her. She unties Ginny. They take both of them toward the surface. The other champions can manage their own. There is no version of Hermione Granger that surfaces from a black lake while 2 people she is responsible for are still tied to a pillar in the dark below her, and there is no version of Harry Potter that would expect her to. They surface together, all 4 of them, in the gray February air. The judges award them second place on the grounds of timing. Hermione notes that this is the least interesting metric by which to evaluate the task, and keeps this opinion to herself. The third task. June. The maze. The hedges are 20 feet tall, and something older than the hedges lives in the spaces between them. The tournament's enchantments carry the specific weight of magic that has been designed to test, which means the obstacles inside respond to the quality of the mind facing them, and 2 minds moving as a coordinated unit face a maze that was designed for individuals with a different kind of problem. They find Cedric Diggory in the second ring, disarmed, pressed against a hedge by a curse that has pinned him to the spot. Harry breaks the curse in 8 seconds. Hermione has already identified the source enchantment and cancelled it at the origin point simultaneously, which reduces the break time from the standard 14 to 8. Cedric stands up, looks at both of them. "You didn't have to do that," he says. He means, "You didn't have to stop. You could have left me." "Yes, we did," Harry says simply. They move through the maze together, all 3 of them, until the path forks and the logic of the tournament separates them. Cedric goes left. Harry and Hermione go right toward the Triwizard Cup glowing blue at the maze's center, and Hermione is thinking about the cup's magical signature. She has been thinking about it since January, since she first began reading the cup's documented properties in a tournament history, and the thought arrives fully formed 3 feet before the cup's plinth, with the specific clarity of something she should have thought 4 months ago. A portkey, she thinks. The cup. It was never just the prize. She says, "Harry." "I know," he says. They look at each other. There are 2 options: leave the cup, or take it knowing what it is, knowing it goes somewhere, and go together rather than have one of them take it alone while the other watches. They have never, in 4 years, chosen the version of any option that means one of them goes alone. They touch the cup at the same moment. The world goes, not dark, not bright, elsewhere. The specific lurch of portkey travel, the destination pull, the arrival that always feels like being dropped from a height. They land in a graveyard. Old stones, old grass, the particular silence of a place that has been quiet for a long time. A cauldron at the center, already prepared. A figure in the shadows, small-robed, carrying something. Harry's scar fires white. Hermione's sovereign field activates with the full automatic defense response she has learned to recognize in moments of genuine threat, the ambient resonance snapping to sharp, structured attention. Every theoretical framework she carries suddenly accessible at the surface of her mind, the way the library of everything she knows opens itself when the stakes are absolute. Wormtail moves fast. She is fast too, but the cauldron is already lit, the ritual circle already drawn in the earth, and she cannot stop what has been set in motion before their arrival. Harry is caught by ropes conjured faster than her protego can cover both of them, binding him to a headstone while she is still clearing the landing. She casts the protego at herself. Full strength, the sovereign field pours into it, and the shield that materializes is not the standard dome, but something more. A standing ward, structured the kind of barrier that does not merely deflect but records. She has one clear thought while Wormtail performs the ritual, while the cauldron's contents respond, while the darkness at the graveyard center coalesces into something with red eyes and no nose, and the specific terrible presence of a thing that has made itself into an abomination and calls that power. The trophy brought us here. The trophy can take us back. Voldemort rises. He stands in the graveyard of his father, and he is real and cold, and the magic he carries is the most concentrated dark frequency Hermione has ever detected. Not the diary's echo, not the ring's residue, but the source, the center, the thing itself. He looks at Harry first, then he looks at her. Something moves in his expression. Not surprise. He has recalibrated his expectations too many times in too many dark rooms to be surprised. What it is, she thinks, is the very precise recognition that the plan had a variable he did not account for, and the variable is standing between him and his intended moment with her wand raised and her shield up and her mind already 3 steps into the problem of how do we leave. 2, he says. His voice is everything she has read it would be, and worse. Curious, the trophy, she says to Harry, clear, factual, across the 12 feet of graveyard between them, same magic that brought us, it can return us, we need it simultaneously, bound to the headstone, looks at her with the absolute trust of 4 years of building exactly this, the ability to communicate a complete plan in a sentence, to act together at the moment of full coordination. On 3, he says. Voldemort raises his wand, Hermione holds her shield and reaches, with her free hand, for the Triwizard Cup where it landed 2 feet to her left. 1, 2, the ropes around Harry dissolve. Not by her spell, she did not cast it. They dissolve because the resonance between them at maximum activation has a field effect on binding magic that targets either of them individually, the same way the memory charm dispersed on Lockhart in the chamber, the same principle, her own discovery applied at speed in the worst circumstances possible. 3. They touch the cup. The graveyard goes elsewhere, Hogwarts, the grounds, the grass under their feet, the castle lights in the dusk, the sound of the crowd, and then the crowd's silence, and then the crowd's eruption as 2 champions arrive upright, together, alive. Harry speaks first, loudly, clearly, to the first adult he sees. Dumbledore arriving at a near run, his purple robes gathered in both hands. He's back. Harry says, Voldemort is back. We were in a graveyard. There was a ritual. He has a body. This is not a rumor, and it is not a delusion, and I need you to convene the Wisengamot because I am a lord of an ancient house, and I am telling you that what I witnessed tonight constitutes a material threat to the wizarding community, requiring formal response. He looks at Harry, he looks at Hermione, he looks at the cup they are both still holding. His expression is the one she has catalogued most carefully across 4 years of close observation, the look of a man watching his chess game play out exactly as he designed it, and finding that the pieces have decided to play a different game. Cedric Diggory arrives 3 minutes later, out of the second entrance to the maze, alive, unharmed, the evidence of it moving through the crowd in a wave of relief that Hermione registers in files and does not yet have time to feel fully. Cedric is alive. That is not what Dumbledore's plan required. But then, none of tonight is. The kitchen at number 12 has become the kind of room that accumulates evidence of sustained work, stacked journals, arithmetic notation sheets weighted at corners with teacups, a wall of parchment that Hermione has covered in frequency maps using a modified permanent ink charm that allows revision without removal. The maps have been growing since June. By August, they cover the entire eastern wall from the counter to the ceiling, dense with notation, cross-referenced and dated. The accumulated intelligence of 4 years rendered visible in a single surface. Sirius stands in the doorway looking at the wall the way a person stands in front of something that makes them feel both proud and frightened. Does Dumbledore know you have this? He asks. He knows we have information, Hermione says, without looking up from the notation she is currently building. He does not know the resolution of it. I intend to show him when the resolution is complete. When will that be? She looks up. Soon. The intrusions begin in July. Harry wakes on the 5th of July at 3 in the morning and sits up in the dark of the room he shares with the accumulated artifacts of a family he never knew, and his scar is not hurting. This is the first notable thing. In the graveyard it had fired white, a pain that had structural quality to it, specific, directional, the scar's connection to Voldemort responding to its maker's proximity. What wakes him on July 5th is different. Not pain, pressure. The sensation of something pressing against the outside of his mind with patient, methodical force, the way water presses against a dam, not through violence but through persistence. He lies back down. He focuses on Hermione's frequency, not consciously, not through any technique they have formally developed, but the way he has learned over 4 years to locate the sovereign field when he needs it, the way you locate a familiar sound in a noisy room. It is there, steady, structured. The specific quality of Hermione's mind, which he has come to recognize the way you recognize a voice, not because you can describe its components, but because you have heard it enough times that it is simply known. The pressure recedes. He falls asleep. He tells her at breakfast. She is already writing before he finishes the sentence. The mechanics are what interest her, not the fact of the intrusion. She had anticipated legilimency attempts, had noted in her Year 5 preparation journal that Voldemort's first strategic action after corporeal return would likely be intelligence gathering through the scar connection, but the specific way it failed. He's targeting your signature, she says, the notation moving under her quill. His legilimency is calibrated to Harry Potter alone, a specific magical fingerprint, but the sovereign field has been overlaying your signature since Year 1. She pauses. Your mind doesn't present as a clean individual target anymore. It presents as a composite, your frequency and mine combined, constant. He aimed at a single frequency and found two. Like trying to intercept one conversation in a room where two people are always talking, Harry says. She looks up. Exactly that. She writes it down because it is a cleaner formulation than what she had written. He won't understand what he's encountered. He's never encountered it. The Grey tradition is 500 years dormant. There is no Death Eater alive who has seen active sovereign field mechanics. He will try again, he will fail again, and eventually he will escalate. To what? She caps her quill, direct assault, full consciousness, full force, aimed at the connection rather than at the surface, not a legilimency probe, a battering ram. And when he does that, he hits the field at maximum reciprocal intensity. She is very precise about the next part. The feedback will hurt him, genuinely, not as a byproduct, as a structural consequence of applying full dark frequency force against a composite resonance that contains its exact countersignature. She pauses. It will be the first time since his resurrection that something has hurt him from a target he believed to be vulnerable. Harry considers this. Good, he says. The assault comes on the night of July 22nd. Hermione knows it is happening before Harry does, which is the aspect of the sovereign field she is still building a complete theoretical framework for. The way significant events in Harry's magical state register in her awareness not as visions or feelings but as disruption, a resonance anomaly, the field's baseline shifting the way a compass shifts near a strong magnetic source. She is at the wall of maps. It is 11:30, the shift happens at 27 minutes past. She marks it in the margin of the notation she is working on, force of habit, and she is out of the kitchen and up the stairs before she has consciously decided to move. Harry is sitting upright in bed when she reaches the doorway. Not screaming, not in visible distress. Sitting completely still with his hands pressed flat against the mattress and his eyes open and every muscle in his body locked in the specific rigid stillness of a person applying the totality of their will to a single task. She does not speak. She crosses the room and sits on the edge of the bed and puts her hand on his arm. The contact point. The circuit. The sovereign field activates at what she will later calculate as the highest intensity she has ever recorded from it. Not a gradual build, but an immediate full field response. The way a system designed for defense responds when the threat it was built to counter arrives at full force. She feels it hit. Voldemort's consciousness, full and terrible and ancient, pressing against the connection with the force of a man who has made himself into a weapon by removing everything from himself that was not useful for destruction. She has been near dark magic many times. The diary, the ring, the locket, the graveyard. But this is not dark magic in an object. This is dark magic in a person, or in the thing that used to be a person. And its presence against the field has a quality she does not have precise language for except wrong, in the way that a sound played backward is wrong, in the way that something designed to consume encountering something designed to sustain creates a reaction that is neither comfortable for either party. The field holds. Then it pushes back. She feels this too. The reciprocal response, the counter frequency that the field generates automatically when dark signature force exceeds a threshold, the standing wave that is the exact negative image of what Voldemort has brought to bear. It does not absorb his assault. It inverts it, returns it along the same channel it arrived on, and the result is not an explosion or a visible phenomenon. What it is, she knows, is a man in whatever dark space he currently occupies, experiencing a pain he did not anticipate from a direction he did not expect, and the knowledge of that has a quality she is not entirely comfortable identifying. She identifies it anyway, in the margin of her journal, later that night, in handwriting that is slightly less neat than usual. Satisfaction, note, examine ethics of this. Harry exhales. The rigidity leaves his body. He leans back against the headboard and looks at the ceiling with the expression of someone who has just passed through something and is still cataloging the interior of it. He's gone, he says. Yes. That hurt him. Yes. A long silence. He won't try that again, Harry says. Not that way. No, he'll recalibrate. He'll look for a different angle of approach. She is already thinking through what those angles might be and finding them limited. The scar connection is the only direct channel. Without it, his intelligence-gathering capability against Harry is limited to physical surveillance and informant networks, both of which are slower and more exposed than legilimency. We've made his primary intelligence asset unreliable. He'll accelerate his timeline for other operations, more attacks, more public attacks, yes. He'll shift from intelligence gathering to demonstration, establishing fear, establishing control, moving against visible ministry targets. She pauses, which means Fudge becomes his first serious obstacle, and Fudge will respond to that threat the same way Fudge responds to all threats, which is to pretend they are not happening. Harry looks at her. While we do what? While we do what we've been doing. She stands. It is past midnight. We file the formal Wizengamot report tomorrow. The testimony is ready. Cedric has confirmed he will corroborate. We submit it on the record, formally as Lord Potter Black and sovereign counterpart of the Dyad. Fudge will bury it, but it will exist. And everything that happens after tonight will happen in the context of a formal record that we warned them. They'll say I'm lying. They'll say a great many things. She moves toward the door. The record doesn't require their belief. It requires their eventual reckoning. The meeting with Dumbledore happens in the third week of August, requested by Hermione in a formal letter through the Hogwarts administrative channel, because formality is not ceremony in this context. It is documentation, and she is building a file. Sirius comes with them. He sits to Harry's left and says nothing for the duration, which is the most politically useful thing he can do, because Sirius Black silent and present in a room carries the specific weight of a man who survived Azkaban on principles, and that weight does not require words. Dumbledore's office, the silver instruments, Fawkes on his perch, watching everything with the calm of a creature that has seen this particular configuration of people and motivations many times and has decided patience is the appropriate response. Hermione places the frequency maps on the desk. Dumbledore looks at them. He picks up the top sheet, the Horcrux signature map, the one she built from the diary's frequency in Year 2, cross-referenced against the ring she detected in Year 3, cross-referenced against 2 ambient dark frequency sources she triangulated during Year 4's Wizengamot sessions. He reads the notation with the attention of a man who understands arithmancy at the highest level and is encountering work that meets him there. He sets the sheet down. "You know what they are," he says. Not a question. "I know what they are," Hermione confirms. "I know the technical term. I know the mechanism. I found the restricted texts in Year 5's pre-term reading." A pause. "I was wondering when you would tell us." The silence in the room has texture. "I had planned," Dumbledore begins, "to introduce this information at a controlled time," Hermione says, "in a controlled context, where you could manage how much we understood and what we did with the understanding." She is not accusatory. She is accurate. "I know. I understand why. The information is genuinely dangerous, and you have spent 40 years making calculations about who can bear what knowledge and when." She folds her hands on the desk. "We are telling you as a courtesy that we already have it, and we are asking you, formally, to tell us how many." Dumbledore looks at Harry. Harry says, "She's asking for both of us." Another silence. "I believe 7, Dumbledore says carefully. "I must be precise. The evidence is strong, but not yet complete. There is one memory I have not yet recovered that would confirm the number absolutely. Until I have it, 7 is my best assessment, not a certainty." He looks at the maps. "But it is a well-founded assessment. How many have been destroyed?" "To my knowledge, the diary, possibly the ring, though I had not yet. The ring's frequency is absent from my maps as of June," she says. "The signature collapsed at source. However, it was destroyed. It's gone." She turns to the next page of her journal. "That leaves 5. Pending confirmation of the full count, we have signatures for 2 of the remaining. I'll need your intelligence on the others. The locket's location, the cup, the diadem." She pauses. "And the last one." "What do you know about the last one?" he says. She looks at him steadily. "I know it was accidental. I know it occurred in Godric's Hollow on October 31st, 1981. And I know that arithmetic modeling of the scar's frequency signature produces a reading consistent with soul shard contamination in a living host. She pauses. I should tell you that I have also detected in my mapping work that the scar is the entry point, but the shard has spread its anchor beyond that. It is threaded into the edges of his core. It is not localized. That distinction matters for what comes next. The office is completely quiet. Harry's face, to his credit, does not change expression. He has known this, in the formless way that some truths are known before they are spoken, since the graveyard. Since feeling Voldemort's consciousness press against the connection and recognizing in that pressure a familiarity that had no clean explanation except the one he had been not thinking about for 4 years, he says, "Tell me you have a solution, not around the problem, not past it, directly at him." "I have the beginning of one," she says. "The field's mechanics give me a framework. The soul shard operates on a dark frequency that the field has been suppressing since year 1. That's why you haven't had the intrusive visions, why the connection to Voldemort has been damped rather than amplified. The suppression has also been doing something else." She turns to the frequency maps on Dumbledore's desk. It's been cataloging. Every time the Horcrux broadcasts its signature, the field records the frequency. I have 3 years of data on the soul shard's complete magical signature, including its anchor distribution through the core. She pauses. If I can generate a counter-frequency with sufficient precision and sufficient intensity, a standing wave that is the exact negative image of the soul shard's signature, contained within the field so it cannot escape, the shard has nowhere to go. It dissolves. Without killing the host, Harry says. Without killing the host. Yes. She holds his gaze. I am not finished building the methodology. It requires year 6 arithmancy at minimum, possibly year 7 level theory. But the principle is sound, and I will finish it. He is reading them with the expression of a man who built his most important plan around a foundation he assumed was unmovable, and is sitting with the first real evidence that someone has been quietly installing a different foundation underneath it. He says, very quietly, "I had believed the sacrifice was necessary." "I know," Hermione says. "I had built everything around that belief." "I know," she says again. "That is why we are telling you now rather than at the moment when you might have tried to act on it." She collects the maps from his desk. "We are not working against you. We are working around the parts of your plan that require Harry to die. Those parts are not fixed requirements. They are conclusions drawn from incomplete information. The information is no longer incomplete." Harry stands. Sirius stands in the particular way that indicates a meeting is concluded on the terms of the people standing. At the door, Hermione pauses. "The Wizengamot report on Voldemort's return will be filed in the coming weeks," she says. "Formally. On the record. I am informing you as a courtesy so that you are not surprised." She looks at Dumbledore one last time. "Fudge will suppress it, but it will exist, and when it is no longer suppressible we will already have been on record. That matters." She leaves. Harry follows. Sirius, at the door, looks back at Albus Dumbledore sitting alone in his office, surrounded by silver instruments and 40 years of plans and a set of frequency maps he did not make. And he says nothing, because nothing is the right thing to say to a man who is discovering, late, that the children he was trying to protect decided some time ago to protect themselves. The door closes. In his office, Dumbledore picks up the frequency map Hermione left on the desk. One she meant to leave, he understands, because she does not do anything by accident, and he reads it again, carefully, in the quiet. Fawkes makes a soft sound from his perch. Dumbledore does not answer. The chamber is older than the ministry building that now contains it. The stone of the walls predates the poured concrete and glass and bureaucratic architecture by 4 centuries. Minimum, you can see the join if you know where to look. The point where very old stone meets very modern construction. The seam of an institution that built itself around something ancient and then tried to make the ancient thing look administrative. The benches are arranged in a horseshoe, tiered, the way all serious, deliberative bodies arrange themselves, so that everyone can see everyone else, so that there is no hiding, so that the political cost of a visible vote is always present as a pressure. 50 members, mostly old, mostly men, mostly wearing the expression of people who have held power for long enough that they have confused the holding of it with the deserving of it. Harry and Hermione walk in wearing school robes. The solicitor Sirius hired in year 4, a woman named Cassia Alderton, who practiced ancient house law from a small office in Diagon Alley, and had not, prior to this engagement, argued a case in front of the full Gamut in 11 years, had prepared them for every procedural challenge they were likely to face. She had also, in a private note delivered to Hermione the previous week, written, "I want you to know that in 30 years of practice, I have never prepared two 15-year-olds for a Wizengamot session, and I want you to know further that I am not remotely concerned about you." Hermione had filed this in the section of her journal labeled Useful Information and moved on. The recognition documents are in order. The stamped certification of Harry's lordship under the Founders' Era Emancipation Statute, confirmed by Gringotts' Inheritance Division and cross-referenced against 3 centuries of Wizengamot procedural precedent, runs to 41 pages. Hermione wrote 26 of them. Alderton wrote the rest. They have been submitted to the chamber clerk since August. Harry and Hermione take their seats in the Ancient Houses section. The bench is old stone and old wood, and it fits them the way any seat fits a person who has decided they belong in it. The reaction moves through the chamber in a visible wave, the way reactions move through rooms where everyone is watching everyone else. A head turning, then the head beside it, then the row behind. The whispers building not into noise, but into the specific hush of a room that has encountered something it does not have a protocol for. Cornelius Fudge, seated at the head of the horseshoe in the minister's chair, looks at them with the expression of a man who received the procedural filings in August and spent 3 weeks hoping the situation would resolve itself without requiring him to act. It has not resolved itself. He rises. He clears his throat. He invokes with the smooth confidence of a man who has been navigating institutional procedure for 30 years, a provision of the current Wizengamot Charter regarding the age requirement for sitting members. Harry's solicitor, Alderton, rises from the gallery. She produces the counter-precedent, 312 years old, formally registered, never repealed. Fudge produces a counter-argument. Alderton produces a secondary precedent, 287 years old. Fudge produces a procedural objection. Harry and Hermione sit quietly through all of this. Hermione has her journal open and is writing. Harry is watching Fudge with the patient attention he usually reserves for Quidditch opponents, tracking the patterns, learning the tells, building a read. He notes that Fudge looks at Dumbledore, who is seated in his chief warlock position 3 seats to the left, twice during the procedural exchange, not for guidance, checking, the way a man checks to see if his most important backer is still backing. Dumbledore's expression is magnificently unreadable. The procedural exchange lasts 40 minutes. At the end of it, Cornelius Fudge sits down, and Harry and Hermione remain in their seats, and the session proceeds. This is the first and most important victory. It requires no drama. Just 40 pages of careful preparation and the willingness to sit still while someone attempts to remove you, knowing the ground you are standing on is solid. Hermione writes in her journal, 40 minutes. Will be shorter next time. He has no more procedural objections available in this category. He knows it. Dolores Umbridge arrives at Hogwarts on September 1st with the specific energy of a person who has been given a mandate and intends to execute it with enthusiasm slightly disproportionate to the scope of the mandate. She is sent to control Harry Potter, Fudge's instrument, Fudge's solution to the problem of a boy who is claiming Voldemort has returned, and drawing attention to the claim by sitting in Wizengamot sessions. If the ministry cannot remove him legally, it can control his platform. It can control the school. It can make his voice within Hogwarts at least small. This is the theory. The theory encounters its first practical problem on the 3rd day of term when Hermione reads the first educational decree posted on the entrance hall notice board and spends 90 minutes in the library cross-referencing it against the ancient house law provisions she has been compiling since year 3. She finds the gap in 40 minutes, spends the remaining 50 verifying it. Ancient house law, she tells Harry and Ron at dinner, her notes spread across the small table, includes a provision allowing a lord of an ancient house to conduct formal training for household members, allies, and those under his protection. The provision has never been repealed because it predates the ministry itself. It exists in Gringotts-administered legal code, not ministry-administered code. Umbridge's educational decrees operate under ministry authority. They cannot reach into Gringotts-administered ancient law. Ron looks at the notes, then at her. So we can run a training cohort. We can run a formally constituted Sovereign House training cohort, yes. Open to any student who elects to affiliate themselves with House Potter Black for educational purposes during their time at Hogwarts. It requires a charter, a faculty sponsor, and a formal registration through the Ancient House legal channel. She pauses. I've already drafted the charter. It's 12 pages. He sets it down. Hermione. Yes, this is brilliant. I know. You wrote this since this morning. I wrote the framework since this morning. I've been building toward it since year 3. She collects her notes. I need Flitwick to sign as faculty sponsor. He will, and I need Harry to formally invoke the ancient house provision. She looks at Harry, which requires you to say on record that you are establishing a training cohort under House Potter Black authority. Right now? Tomorrow. I've scheduled a meeting with the Hogwarts Administrative Registrar for 8 in the morning. She pauses. We should sleep. The DA charter is registered on September 9th. Umbridge receives a copy through official channels on 9/11 because Hermione files a courtesy notification because documentation of proper procedure protects the procedure, and she reads it 3 times looking for the angle of attack and cannot find it because there is no angle of attack. The provision is real, the authority is real, the charter is airtight. She responds with a new educational decree anyway, a broad prohibition on student organizations of any kind without High Inquisitor approval. Alderton files a legal challenge the same day, citing the ancient house provision's immunity from ministry tier authority. The challenge sits in the Wisengamot's procedural queue. This is Fudge's last resort, bureaucratic delay. The challenge will take months to resolve through standard channels. Harry and Hermione hold their sessions anyway, twice weekly, in a room Hermione found in year 5 by walking the 7th floor corridor and thinking very specifically about what she needed. The room, in its obliging way, provides it. The DA fills. Not just Gryffindors. Students from all 4 houses, drawn by something more than the classes, more than the instruction. Drawn by the specific gravity of 2 people who have been demonstrating for 4 years that power exercised with clarity and purpose is different from power exercised for its own sake. Neville Longbottom discovers in October that he can grow plants without a wand. He is practicing a basic herbology review, waiting for his shield charm to stabilize, and he sets his wand down on the floor and holds his hand over a seed, and the seed germinates. Not slowly, not gradually. In 4 seconds, under his palm, a shoot emerges from the soil and reaches toward the ceiling with the specific eagerness of something that has been waiting for exactly this invitation. He looks at his hand, he looks at the shoot, he looks at Harry. That, Harry says carefully, is a very old kind of magic. Is it supposed to? Yes, Hermione says from across the room, already moving toward them. Journal out. It's wandless intent casting through organic resonance. The magic works through the plant's own growth instinct. You're amplifying rather than directing. That is, Neville, that is extraordinary. That is year 7 level theory at minimum. She looks at him with the expression she reserves for data that exceeds her projections. Do it again. He does it again. The room pays attention to the kind of things that happen in it, and what happens in it over the course of year 5 is this. 40 students learn to cast a Patronus. 60 learn Wandless Lumos. Neville Longbottom becomes, by February, the most talented wandless practitioner in the cohort after Harry and Hermione. Luna Lovegood, who attends every session and says very little, produces a shield charm in November that operates on a different principle than any shield charm in Flitwick's curriculum. And when Hermione asks her how she did it, she says, I just thought about what I wanted to keep out, which is either profound or self-evident, and is possibly both. The blood quill appears in October. Ron finds out first. He moves through spaces that the duo cannot. He is, as Hermione noted in year 1, ordinary, and ordinary is a form of invisibility that has its own intelligence-gathering capability. He comes to the small table at breakfast on a Thursday, with his jaw set in the way that means he has been sitting with something terrible for 12 hours, and has now organized it into actionable information. He puts 3 pieces of parchment on the table. Student testimonies, handwritten, each one describing the same instrument, the same detentions, the same words carved into the same place. Harry reaches for his parchment. Ron puts his hand flat on the table over Harry's. No, he says. We do it the way Hermione said. We document, we file, we make it cost her through the process, not through you doing something that gives her grounds to act against us. Harry looks at him. I know, Ron says. I know what you want to do, but the file is better. The file lasts longer. 3 witnesses, Hermione says, already writing. We need medical documentation. Madame Pomfrey will examine students who present with injuries sustained in educational settings. She's required to under Hogwarts duty of care provisions. We need her examination notes. We need the testimony sworn through the Gringotts notarization service, so they carry legal weight, and we need to file before she knows we're filing. How long, Harry says. 2 weeks to do it properly. She looks up. I know that is not the answer you want, but a proper file cannot be challenged. A rushed complaint can be dismissed. We do it properly. Alderton delivers the formal Wizengamot complaint to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement through the Gringotts-administered Ancient Houses filing channel, which operates outside standard ministry procedure under provisions maintained in ancient legal code, and therefore bypasses Fudge's desk entirely, landing directly with the Wizengamot's Oversight Committee. The complaint is 17 pages, Madame Pomfrey's examination notes on 7 students, a legal analysis of the blood quill's classification as a dark instrument under the 1867 Prohibited Implement Statute, and a formal demand for an inquiry into both the instrument's use and the authority under which it was sanctioned. Amelia Bones, who heads the DMLE and has spent 2 years quietly building her own concerns about Fudge's ministry, reads the complaint in full. On the same Monday morning, she opens an investigation by afternoon. Umbridge's downfall does not arrive with confrontation. It does not arrive through the centaurs, or through Dumbledore, or through any of the dramatic channels that a person in her position might have anticipated as threats. It arrives through a 17-page document filed through correct procedural channels by 2 15-year-olds and an ancient house law solicitor who had not argued before the full Wizengamot in 11 years, and won comprehensively. She resigns in March. Before the inquiry concludes, before the full evidentiary record becomes public, the resignation letter cites health concerns. Hermione reads the resignation notice in the Daily Prophet over breakfast and writes one line in her journal: documented, filed, resolved, moved to the next problem. The Department of Mysteries. June. They go because they know it is a trap, which is the most important thing, the thing that changes everything about how they go. Hermione's certainty about this arrives in the second week of June when Harry's scar disruption pattern, residual, weakened, the Horcrux suppression keeping it at a fraction of its former intensity, produces a specific signal she has been watching for. A sustained low-frequency broadcast, directional, originating from the Ministry building. Not a vision, not a legilimency probe, a signal designed to be received, not to intrude, designed to feel like discovery rather than transmission. It's a lure, she tells Harry, in the DA room, with the resonance compass open on the table between them. He made you think you found something. He made you think Sirius is there. He needs you to come in emotional and reactive and without preparation. But what if Sirius were in genuine danger, she says, and her voice is steady, the steadiness that is not coldness but precision, he would reach us through Dumbledore or through the Order, not through Voldemort's mind, not through a signal that has his deliberate broadcast signature on it. She holds his gaze. He made you see exactly what you would run toward. That is how you know it is not real. A long silence. We go anyway, Harry says. The prophecy is a real target. If he wants it badly enough to stage this, the orb is real and we should control who gets to it. Yes, she says, we go. But we go prepared, and we take the DA. The battle in the Department of Mysteries is larger, louder, and more chaotic than anything they have trained for, and they are still, demonstrably, the most prepared people in the room. Neville holds a corridor alone for 4 minutes, using wandless herbology magic and one borrowed wand, controlling the engagement through terrain rather than combat, buying time with the specific competence of a person who has discovered their capability late and is now absolutely determined to justify it. Luna Lovegood, whose shield charm operates on a principle Flitwick still cannot fully explain, protects 3 people simultaneously in the Hall of Prophecy with the calm of someone who has never found reality particularly more alarming than the alternative. Ron, coordinating from the central position, moves people through the architecture of the Ministry, the way he moves pieces across a chessboard. Not heroically, not visibly, but with a spatial intelligence that keeps the exits open and the engagement terms controlled. Sirius reaches the veil at the end of a duel with Bellatrix that he is winning, clearly, the joy of combat visible in him the way it was always visible in the people who described him before Azkaban. And then Bellatrix turns the duel ugly, a curse that is designed not to end the fight, but to end the fighter. And Sirius feels it coming, not with enough time to fully evade, but enough to move. He moves left, not back. The veil is close behind him. He feels its cold pull more than sees it, and he moves left. Bellatrix's curse catches his shoulder, not his chest. He spins. He goes down. Hermione's Petrificus Totalis arrives mid-stride, aimed through a gap in the engagement that she identified 2 seconds before it opened, and Bellatrix Lestrange hits the floor of the death chamber like a dropped stone. every muscle locked, and does not complete the step that would have taken her to where Sirius is getting up. He is getting up. Not gracefully, slowly, one hand on the stone floor, his shoulder wrong in a way that will require significant healing, his expression containing the particular complicated feeling of a man who has just been reminded that he is mortal and is choosing to treat this reminder as useful information rather than catastrophe. He looks at Hermione. She is already moving to the next target. He looks at Harry. Later, Harry says, and the word contains everything, relief and fear, and the pragmatic necessity of staying in the engagement because it is not over. And Sirius hears all of it. Later he agrees and gets to his feet. The kitchen at the Burrow is the architectural opposite of every other kitchen Ron Weasley has ever seen Harry or Hermione occupy. It is not large. It is not organized. It operates on a principle of productive chaos that would give Hermione a mild anxiety response if she thought about it clinically, which she has learned not to do, because the food that emerges from it is extraordinary, and the warmth that lives in it is the kind that cannot be designed. It accumulates. It is the residue of a family that has been loud and present and genuinely glad to see each other for 30 years, and it is settled into the walls the way the cold settled into the walls of Grimmauld Place, except it is the opposite of cold. Ron sits at the kitchen table on the first morning of summer with a cup of tea and a notebook that nobody has seen before. Harry and Hermione are across from him. Outside the window, the garden is doing what the Burrow's garden always does, operating independently, enthusiastically, with complete indifference to the concept of horticultural control. Ron opens the notebook to the first page. "I want to show you something," he says. The notebook contains an organizational chart. It is not a simple chart. It is the product Hermione will later calculate of approximately 60 hours of sustained work. She can tell by the density of revision, the layers of annotation in different ink colors that indicate the thinking happened across multiple sessions, the crossed-out sections where an approach was abandoned and rebuilt. It maps the DA network not as a list of names but as a functional structure. Communication chains, capability assessments, geographic distribution across Wizarding Britain, resource inventories, contact protocols for order-adjacent families, and a tiered alert system that operates through Owl Post in ways that would be difficult for Ministry surveillance to intercept. At the center of the chart, in a circle drawn in red ink, H+H. Around them, in the first ring, Ron, Neville, Luna, Ginny, Cedric. Around that, in expanding rings, 43 names. Hermione looks at the chart for a long time. Then she looks at Ron. "When did you build this?" she says. "Started in February, after the Ministry." He turns to the second page. "This is the communication protocol. This is the capability matrix. Who can do what, rated by my assessment after 2 years of watching them in DA sessions. This is the resource map. And this," he turns to the last page, "is the gap analysis. What we have, what we're missing, what we need to build before whatever comes next comes next." Harry is reading the capability matrix. He sets it down. He looks at Ron with the expression he gets when something exceeds his expectations, in a way that recalibrates his model of a situation. "Ron," he says, "I know, this is—" "I know." Ron picks up his tea. "I've been thinking about what I'm for, in relation to you two, and I think—" He stops, restarts. "I think I've been waiting for someone to tell me what I am in this, and nobody was going to tell me, so I had to work it out myself." He turns to the gap analysis. "I'm not a sovereign. I don't have what you have. I never will, and I don't want it. That's not false modesty, that's just accurate. But I can see the structure of what you're building, and I can see the parts that need managing, and I can see that you two are too close to the center of it to manage those parts yourselves." He looks at both of them directly, which is a Ron Weasley quality that has always been present but has sharpened over 6 years into something that feels like a tool rather than a habit. "I want to be your general, not your support. Your general. Different thing." The kitchen is quiet in the way kitchens are quiet when they are holding a significant moment. Hermione's eyes fill. Not from sentimentality. Harry knows this. He has known her for 6 years, and he has learned to read the specific quality of her responses. Her eyes fill because the gap analysis on the last page of Ron's notebook identifies with complete accuracy 3 structural weaknesses in their operational capability that she has been aware of and has not yet solved. And Ron has not only identified them independently, but has sketched preliminary approaches to all 3. Her eyes fill the way they fill when she encounters work that is better than she expected, which is not often, which is why it affects her when it happens. "The recruitment gap," she says, pointing to the first weakness on the gap analysis. You've identified that we're drawing from the same social networks repeatedly. We need reach into families that don't already skew toward us. Hufflepuff, Ron says. We're weak in Hufflepuff. I have 3 names. Students whose families have reason to oppose Voldemort that doesn't come from ideological alignment with us. Personal reason, more durable under pressure than ideology. He turns to the communication protocol. I also think our owl post chain is one interdiction away from collapse. I've been designing a redundancy. 3 parallel chains, no single point of failure. She reads it cover to cover in 11 minutes, which is fast even for her, the speed of someone reading for confirmation of things they are simultaneously synthesizing. She puts it down. Yes, she says simply. Ron looks at her. Yes what? Yes to all of it. Yes to being our general. Yes to this becoming the operational structure. She slides the notebook back to him. There are 2 additions I want to make to the capability matrix and 1 revision to the communication protocol. Otherwise, this is better than what I would have built independently. Ron's expression does not change, but something in his posture does, the specific release of a person who has been holding a question for a long time and has just received the answer they needed. Right, he says. He picks up a quill. Tell me the revisions. Arthur Weasley finds Ron in the garden at dusk. 3 days later, sitting on the old garden bench with the notebook in his lap and a look on his face that Arthur recognizes, the look of a person who has made a large decision and is living in the first days of the aftermath, feeling the weight of the thing they chose. Arthur sits beside him. He does not ask immediately. Arthur Weasley has raised 6 sons and is raising a daughter, and he knows that the questions that matter are the ones that arrive after you have established that you are simply present. After a while, Ron says, Dad, how do you know what you're worth? Not what you're good at, what you're actually worth. Arthur considers this seriously, the way he considers everything his children bring him, which is one of his most important qualities and one of the least remarked on. I think, he says, that worth and value are different things. Value is what you can do. Worth is what you choose to do with what you can do. The second one is yours to decide. The first one just is. Ron looks at the notebook. I'm ordinary, compared to them. Ron looks at him. You are ordinary, Arthur says, and his voice is neither apologetic nor emphatic. It is factual the way Arthur Weasley is almost always factual, which is why his children trust him, and Harry Potter can move mountains. And Hermione Granger can tell you the precise geological and magical theory of how mountain movement works, but neither of them can walk into a room full of ordinary people and make those people feel seen and valued and ready to do something difficult. He pauses. That's what you can do. It's not a lesser thing, it's a different thing. And next to them, it's exactly the thing they don't have. Ron is quiet for a long time. She cried, he says, when she saw the notebook. Arthur smiles. Did she? She doesn't cry easily. No. I imagine she doesn't. The garden moves in the evening wind, gnomes grumbling somewhere in the undergrowth, the burrow's lights coming on window by window as the family assembles for dinner. She said it was better than what she would have built independently, Ron says. Well, Arthur says, standing, brushing grass from his robes. There you are then. Molly Weasley's discomfort is not spoken directly. It lives in the specific way she watches Harry and Hermione at the dinner table, the fraction of a second too long before she passes them things. The occasional quality of her silences when the conversation moves to things that are happening outside the kitchen, in the world that her children are walking toward and she cannot follow. She is not afraid of Harry. She is afraid for Ron. This distinction matters, and Ginny, who is 17 and perceptive in the way that youngest children are perceptive, trained by years of observation from the back of a large family, understands it clearly enough to bring it to Ron one evening in the garden. Mum thinks you're going to get hurt, Ginny says without preamble, because Weasleys do not preamble to each other. She thinks you're choosing to stand next to a lightning rod. I know. Are you? Ron thinks about this honestly, which is the only way he thinks about things that matter. Probably, he says, but not because I don't have a choice, because it's the right place to be. And because I'm not standing next to a lightning rod. I'm the one making sure the lightning rod has a ground wire. He pauses. Mum doesn't see that part. Ginny is quiet for a moment. I do, she says. I've seen it since 3rd year. She looks at the burrow's lights, the kitchen window warm and yellow, their mother's silhouette moving back and forth inside it. I was a puppet, she says, and the directness of it still has a quality of something that cost something to say 3 years on. The diary, I was a vessel for something that was using me, and I didn't know, and Harry and Hermione got me out of it. She turns to look at Ron. I understand why you chose where you chose. I'd do the same. I know, Ron says. You already have. This is true. Ginny Weasley at 15 is the most outspoken advocate for the duo's political work among their peers. Not because she was instructed to be, but because she has a specific and personal understanding of what it means that they are dismantling the systems that allowed the diary to happen, that allowed a ministry to look away from dark artifacts planted in children's school supplies, and she is vocal about it, with the particular authority of someone who has been on the inside of the damage. The recruitment letter arrives in August. It is ministry letterhead, Provisional Governance Council seal, addressed to Ron Weasley directly. Not to the Weasley family, not to a Hogwarts student. To Ron Weasley, identified as the primary logistical intelligence contact for the Sovereign Dyad, invited to discuss a role in the provisional governance restructuring that is beginning, tentatively cautiously, in the political vacuum that Fudge's ministry is quietly becoming. Ron reads it at breakfast. He reads it twice. He sets it on the table. Harry and Hermione are across from him. He pushes it across the table. He does not say anything. He watches them read it. Hermione reads it first. She reads it with the focused speed that means she is not just reading but processing implications, tracing the document's meaning through 3 layers of context simultaneously. She passes it to Harry. Harry reads it slower. He looks up. This is because of you, he says to Ron. Not because of us. They're not reaching for a dyad proxy. They're reaching for you specifically because they've identified what you've been doing independently. I know, Ron says. That's different from what people usually assume about you, Hermione says quietly. They usually see you as adjacent to us. This letter sees you as not that. I know. Ron picks the letter back up. I wanted you to see it first, before I responded, because, he stops, considers, because this is the beginning of something separate, and you should know that I know that, and that I'm not going anywhere. A silence. Not uncomfortable, the specific silence of 3 people who have known each other long enough that the silences are precise. This one means understood, acknowledged, honored. What are you going to say? Harry asks. Yes. Ron folds the letter, puts it in his pocket. Obviously, yes. Someone has to go in there and make sure the people rebuilding the ministry have a general who knows what the structure actually needs. He picks up his tea. I'll visit. I'm not leaving. He will visit. He does not leave. He never does. In the DA room on the first evening of August, running a practice session with the 12 members of the network who were within reach over summer, Ron stands at the front of the room with Harry and Hermione to his left and runs the session with the specific authority of a person who is no longer asking permission to occupy the space he is standing in. Neville makes a plant grow to the ceiling in 6 seconds and looks at his hands with the slightly startled expression he always wears when his own capability surprises him. Luna says something about the light in the room that is technically incorrect as physics and completely accurate as observation. Ginny runs a shielding drill with 3 first-years who have joined the network early and are ferocious. All 3 of them, with the specific ferocity of children who have grown up knowing the war is real. Harry and Hermione work in the corner, synchronized, the sovereign field present and quiet and structural, the way it always is when they are working rather than fighting, not blazing, not loud, just there, the way a foundation is there, holding the weight of everything built on top of it without announcing itself. Ron watches the room, his network, his contribution to something larger than himself, built with his own hands, on his own terms. He is the shield, not the sword, not the mind, the thing that holds the shape when everything else is moving. He has known for a long time that this is what he is. He has only recently stopped waiting for someone else to confirm it before he believed it himself. He does not need the confirmation anymore. The Black family ritual chamber is in the basement, below the kitchen, below the wine cellar that Sirius converted into a training space in year 4. Below everything. It predates the house by 2 centuries. The house was built around it, not the other way around, which is the correct order of operations when you are building a structure that is meant to contain the practice of very old magic. The walls are stone, not plaster over stone. The floor is stone. The ceiling is low and arched and covered in protective runes that have been renewed by every generation of the Black family since 1692. The newest layer of inscriptions sitting over the oldest, the way new growth sits over old growth in a forest. Distinct, datable, cumulative. Hermione has been preparing this room since March. The runic array she has inscribed on the floor takes up the entire central space, 12 feet across, built from the complete Peverell runic alphabet cross-referenced against 3 arithmetic frequency frameworks, and 1 principle from Grey magic theory that Sirius taught them in year 3, and that she has spent 4 years developing into something operational. It has taken her 9 months to design, 6 weeks to inscribe. Every line is precise to a tolerance she determined mathematically and verified, 3 times. She stands at the edge of it and looks at it the way you look at something that took a very long time to build and that you are about to use for the first time. Lupin is behind her. He arrived this morning, called by Sirius, because Sirius made a unilateral decision that 3 adults and 2 17-year-olds in a room where one of the 17-year-olds might temporarily stop living constitutes the minimum responsible staffing for the operation. And Hermione had argued and Sirius had said, "I am not negotiating this one," and she had looked at his face and recognized the specific quality of that particular sentence and accepted it. Sirius stands at the monitoring station she built into the ritual's northern quadrant, a set of diagnostic charms anchored to parchment that will display Harry's vital signs in real time. His expression is the one he has been wearing since she showed him the full extraction methodology in April. A man who understands enough about what is planned to know that it is the correct plan, and not enough about whether it will work to be entirely calm about it. Harry lies on the stone table at the center of the array. He is looking at the ceiling. His hands are flat at his sides. He has been quiet since they came downstairs, which is not unusual for him before something significant. He goes inward, not outward, collects himself rather than externalizing. She has known this about him since year 2. She stands beside the table. "Tell me the constraints again," she says. Not because she needs to hear them, because he needs to say them, because saying them is a form of preparation, the same way warming up a muscle before using it is preparation. "Maximum field intensity for the first 2 minutes," Harry says. "Don't push past threshold until you give the signal. If I stop responding to your voice, you pull me back regardless of where the extraction is. Non-negotiable," she confirms. And I hold the intent. No passive acceptance. The soul shard is anchored through my scar and threaded into my core. Passive acceptance gives it a stable surface to grip. I have to actively want it gone. Continuously. For the duration, even when it shows you things. Even when it shows me things. She looks at him. He looks at the ceiling for another moment, then at her. "I've wanted it gone since I was 11, he says, "since the first time I understood what it was. That is not going to be difficult to sustain." She nods once, picks up her wand. The first attempt begins at 9 in the morning and runs for 41 minutes before she ends it. The mechanics work as designed. The sovereign field activates at full intensity when she speaks the opening incantation, the runic array's counter-frequency engaging the soul shard's signature with the precision she has been building toward for 3 years. She can feel the shard in the field the way you feel a splinter in a wound, a wrong thing in a right place, the specific discomfort of foreign material that the body recognizes as foreign even when it cannot locate it precisely. The counter-frequency pushes. The shard resists. This is expected. She designed for resistance what she did not fully account for as the shard's response to the counter-frequency. Not passive resistance, not merely holding its ground, but active generation. It broadcasts. At full intensity, it produces visions with the clarity of direct legilimency, aimed not at Harry but at the field itself, because the shard is 50 years old and it understands, with the rudimentary intelligence of a fragment of Voldemort's consciousness, that the field is the threat. Harry sees his parents die. Not memory, reconstruction. The shard has access to everything in Harry's magical core, every experience, every image that has ever attached itself to his scar, and it uses all of it, assembling scenes with the specific accuracy of something that knows exactly which images have the weight to destabilize. She can feel his intent waver, not break, waver a fractional loss of the active rejection she needs him to sustain, the kind of micro-fluctuation that registers in the field as a brief instability. She ends the attempt at 41 minutes because the wavering has not resolved, and she will not continue a ritual with unstable conditions. Harry sits up slowly. His nose is bleeding. He wipes it with the back of his hand and says nothing. "The visions are stronger than I modeled for," she says, already at her notation table, writing. "The shard isn't just defending, it's attacking the field's stability through your emotional response. I need to adjust the frequency modulation in the 4th quadrant of the array to add a dampening layer on the broadcast." "How long to adjust?" Sirius says. 2 hours. She is already measuring. "We run the second attempt this afternoon." The second attempt begins at 3 in the afternoon. The dampening layer helps. The visions still come. She cannot eliminate them without dampening the counter frequency itself, which would reduce the extraction pressure below operational threshold. But their intensity is reduced by approximately 40%, enough that Harry's intent holds steady through the first 30 minutes without wavering. At 37 minutes, his scar splits. Not metaphorically, the tissue along the scar line opens, a clean linear wound that produces a specific kind of blood, darker than it should be, with a quality she identifies immediately as soul shard matter becoming physical as the extraction pressure increases, the shard fighting to maintain its anchor through every available mechanism, including its threaded connection through the core, straining against the counter frequency at every point of contact. Harry makes a sound she has never heard him make. Not a cry, something below that, something interior, the sound of a person experiencing pain that has exceeded their capacity to process it silently. She holds the frequency. "I have you," she says. Her voice is level. She has decided it will be level, and it is. "I have you, hold the intent. It's working." Behind her, Sirius is on his feet. Lupin has his wand out. She does not look at either of them. "Hold," she says to Harry. He holds. At 52 minutes, his vital signs on Sirius's monitoring parchment develop an irregularity that is not the irregularity of pain or stress, but of something more fundamental. His heart rate drops, not gradually, stepwise in the specific pattern of a cardiac response to extreme magical depletion. She holds the frequency. At 58 minutes, Lupin says her name. At 59 minutes, Sirius says, "Hermione." The soul shard is cracked. She can feel it in the field, the specific quality of something partially fractured, less cohesive than it was this morning, the edges of its frequency signature ragged where they were clean. Progress? Not sufficient. Not yet. Harry lies back on the table. His scar is bleeding sluggishly, the dark quality of it already fading as the extraction pressure recedes. Lupin heals it with a careful charm. Sirius is performing every diagnostic he knows, his hands moving through the air above Harry's chest with the specific speed of a man running through a checklist he has rehearsed in his mind for 6 weeks. Heart rate stabilizing, Sirius reports. His voice is flat in the way that contains a great deal that is being kept below the surface. "I'm fine," Harry says. "I know," Sirius says, and his voice cracks on the second word in a way he cannot prevent. Harry looks at him. He reaches up and puts his hand briefly on Sirius's arm and does not say anything, because sometimes the acknowledgement matters more than the words. Hermione is at the notation table. She is writing with the hand that is not shaking, and the hand that is shaking she is keeping below the table's edge. The shard is cracked. She knows how to finish it. The adjustments she needs to make are clear to her. She can see them in the notation with the complete clarity of someone who has been building toward this for 3 years and has just received the final piece of data they needed. She writes, "Third attempt, tomorrow morning. Fresh reserves. Adjusted modulation in quadrants 2 and 4, extended dampening radius, 6-minute maximum push-pass threshold. It will be enough." She underlines "it will be enough" and then writes beside it, in smaller notation, "it has to be." The third attempt begins at 8 in the morning. The adjustments are correct. She knows they are correct from the moment the field engages the shard's frequency, and the response is different. The broadcast that produced the visions is dampened to a level Harry can hold intent through. The counter-frequency landing on the cracked shard with the precise pressure of something designed for this specific application. And the shard's resistance, which was formidable on the first 2 attempts, has a different quality now. It is still fighting, but it is fighting the way something fights when it is losing, rather than the way something fights when it believes it can win. The visions come. Harry sees James Potter dying. He sees Hermione walking away from him, her back turned, the image of her choosing to leave rendered with the specific cruelty of the shard's knowledge of what would destabilize him most. He sees Sirius falling, not through the veil, the shard using the near miss from the Department of Mysteries, reshaping it into the version where he did not step left in time. He sees Ron dead in the Ministry corridor. He holds the intent. "I want it gone." At 32 minutes, the shard's frequency begins to collapse inward, not gradually, a threshold moment the way a crack in ice spreads. Slowly and then all at once, the frequency signature that Hermione has been tracking for 5 years, the one she first recorded in year 2 from the remnants of the diary, the one she mapped through 100 detection sessions, and 1 graveyard and 3 years of careful notation, folds in on itself and begins to dissolve. Harry's scar opens again. Whiter this time, the dark blood runs in a line down his forehead, and the substance of it changes as she watches. The quality she identified as soul shard matter bleeding away first, dissipating the darkness, leaving the blood until what runs is simply red. Harry screams. She does not stop. She holds the frequency with both hands on her wand and both feet on the floor, and the whole of her arithmetic framework in the front of her mind, and she does not stop. Sirius is standing. Lupin has his wand aimed at the array, ready to collapse it if she gives the signal, his expression the expression of a man holding himself completely still through will alone. The shard collapses. Not an explosion, not a discharge. A dissolution, the frequency signature going from present to fractured to absent across approximately 4 seconds. The field registering the change the way a room registers the ending of a sound that has been present for so long you stopped hearing it and only notice it now that it is gone. Hermione releases the incantation. The silence in the room is the loudest thing she has ever heard. Harry's vital signs on the monitoring parchment are wrong. Not in the way that means he is in distress, in the way that means a system that has been running in a compromised state for 16 years has just stopped being compromised. And the cessation of the compromise looks, to the diagnostic charms, like an anomaly because they were calibrated against his baseline, and his baseline was always the Horcrux's presence, and there is no longer a Horcrux present. His heart is not beating. Harry, she says. Nothing. Sirius is casting before she finishes saying the name. Renervate, Mobile Corpus. 3 spells in sequence with the speed of panic channeled into training. She is casting too. The pair of them working from opposite sides of the table, and the 10 seconds that follow are the 10 seconds she will spend the most time not thinking about afterward, because what is in them is not something she can hold in notation or framework or precise language. 17 seconds. Harry gasps. The breath tears into him like something that has been waiting outside a door and has been let in, and his eyes open, and what is in them is the expression of a person who has just returned from somewhere very close to the edge of not returning. He presses his palm to his forehead. To the scar, he holds it there. The room waits. It's quiet, he says. His voice is different. Not in timbre. In quality, there is no undertone in it. None of the specific resonance she learned to identify in year 3 as the shard's ambient frequency bleeding into his speech patterns. It is simply his voice. Just Harry's voice with nothing underneath it that does not belong to him. She runs the resonance compass over his scar. The runes do not glow. No soul shard frequency. No dark contamination. No foreign signature of any kind. She looks at the reading for 3 seconds. She writes it in her journal. Scar, clear, soul shard, dissolved, host, intact. She writes it in the notation of a scientist recording a result. Then she closes the journal and sets it on the table and does not pick it up again for the rest of the day. Sirius makes a sound that is not a word. He sits down on the floor of the ritual chamber. Just sits down, right there, his back against the stone wall and his face in his hands, and his shoulders doing something that Lupin, who has known him since they were 11 years old, places his hand on and holds steady. Lupin looks at Harry. His expression contains everything that a man carries when he looks at the son of his best friend. Alive and whole, and finally, after 17 years not carrying something that was never his to carry, Harry looks at the ceiling for a long time. 5 down, he says quietly. He turns his head to look at Hermione. 2 to go. She meets his eyes. The map is still open. The work is not finished. There is Nagini, and there is Voldemort himself. Mortal now, vulnerable in a way he has not been since before Harry was born, but not yet ended. But this moment, in this stone room, with the compass reading clear and Harry's voice finally only Harry's, this is the thing the rest of it is built on. She does not have a clinical category for what she feels. She does not look for one. The war has a texture now that it did not have in previous years. It is not louder. It is denser. The Daily Prophet runs stories that are half true and carefully arranged to produce specific emotional responses in its readership, which tells you more about who is controlling it than any masthead declaration. The Ministry's corridors have developed the specific atmosphere of an institution that knows it is being hollowed from within and has not yet decided whether to resist or accommodate. Fudge is gone. His replacement, Rufus Scrimgeour, is harder and cleverer and also compromised in different ways that Hermione has been mapping since his appointment. The Death Eaters move differently now than they did in year 5. They are not hiding. They are positioning, a distinction that matters because hiding is defensive and positioning is preparatory, and what they are preparing for is the seizure of an institution rather than its destruction. Voldemort has learned from 3 years of watching the duo dismantle his political infrastructure through that institution's own mechanisms that the Ministry is more useful as a captured instrument than as a ruin. He has one remaining Horcrux. He is mortal. He knows it. A mortal Voldemort is not a lesser Voldemort. He is a Voldemort who has removed his patience from the equation. The first motion is filed in October. The target is Lucius Malfoy. The evidence file runs to 63 pages. Hermione built it across 3 months, assembling from sources that include the forensic Gringotts report on the diary's provenance that Harry commissioned in year 2, which was suppressed by the previous Ministry administration but exists in the Gringotts archive, accessible to Lord Potter Black through his banking relationship. Dobby's testimony, transcribed and notarized in year 3, after Dobby was freed at the end of their 2nd year, when he was no longer bound by the constraints of house elf servitude to the Malfoy family and could speak freely, which the elf gave willingly, and with the specific relief of someone who has been carrying information for a decade and has finally been asked for it in a context where it will be used. Witness accounts from the Ministry battle, corroborated across 11 separate testimonies, and a detailed accounting of Lucius Malfoy's Wizengamot voting record in the period 1979 to 1981. Cross-referenced against documented Death Eater activity in the same period, which produces a correlation that is not proof individually, but is, assembled, a picture that requires a great deal of motivated reasoning to look away from. The motion invokes the attainder provision. Hermione explains it to Harry and Ron the night before the session, at the kitchen table in Grimmauld Place, with the file open and 3 cups of tea going cold. Attainder exists in pre-ministry law, she says. It predates the Wizengamet's current charter by 4 centuries. It provides for the stripping of ancient house standing and Wizengamet representation from members found guilty of actions against the Wizarding Compact, which is defined in the original statute not as treason against any government, but as actions that materially endanger the magical community's foundational well-being. She turns to the relevant page. The Ministry has never repealed it, because the Ministry has never had to use it. The last time it was invoked was 1692, which predates the Ministry's founding. It exists in Gringotts-administered legal code, not Ministry-administered code, which means Granger cannot block the motion on procedural grounds without simultaneously challenging the Gringotts Accord that underpins his own institution's legal authority. Ron reads the motion. He sets it down. He'll try anyway. He'll try. He won't succeed. She closes the file. The evidence is sufficient, and the legal mechanism is sound. What matters is not whether Malfoy is convicted in the criminal sense. That takes longer, requires a separate proceeding, gives him more time to obstruct. What matters is that his Wizengamot seat is suspended pending full inquiry. He loses his vote. He loses his platform. He loses the political cover that has protected him for 20 years. She pauses, and we do it through the institution's own architecture. Which is the point, Harry says. Which is the point every action we take through legitimate process is an action Voldemort cannot reframe as lawless rebellion. We are not insurgents. We are lords of ancient houses exercising standing that has existed for 3 centuries. That framing matters. It makes everything we do structurally different from what he is doing. The London night outside is the specific darkness of a city that is doing its best not to acknowledge that something is wrong with the air. How many after Malfoy, he asks. 11, Hermione says. 11 Wizengamot members with sufficient evidential basis for attainder motions. Some will require more time to build the files. Malfoy is first because his file is strongest and because his seat carries the most political leverage. She picks up her quill. We file in sequence, not in a batch, individually each one on its own merits, each one requiring the institution to process a separate case. A batch looks like a purge. Individual cases look like accountability. Accountability is harder to dismiss. She writes a date at the top of the filing schedule. It's also harder to defend against if you're on the receiving end. Malfoy will arrive at the chamber knowing what evidence exists. He cannot challenge the Gringotts report's provenance. He cannot challenge Dobby's notarized testimony freely given after his emancipation. He cannot challenge the voting record correlation because the correlation is drawn from public documents. She looks up. He will have very expensive solicitors, and he will be absolutely furious. None of that changes the evidence. Lucius Malfoy arrives at the Wizengamot chamber on the 14th of October, wearing robes that cost more than most wizarding families earn in a year, and carrying the specific confidence of a man who has never been seriously inconvenienced by an institution he has been purchasing influence in for 2 decades. He sits, he looks at Harry and Hermione across the chamber with an expression that has cycled over 3 years of watching them operate, through contempt and irritation and something he would not name as unease but that functions like unease. Alderton presents the motion. Hermione sits still. Harry sits still. Ron, in the gallery as an observer with his notebook open, sits still. Malfoy's solicitors present their counter-arguments. The arguments are sophisticated, technically correct in several places, and insufficient. Not because the duo's evidence is perfect, it is very good, but it is not perfect. But because the legal mechanism they are using operates at a threshold that requires not proof of guilt in the criminal sense, but reasonable evidential basis for the suspension of standing pending full inquiry. The threshold is lower by design. It was designed lower because the original framers understood that ancient house standing is a public trust, not a private entitlement, and that a lower threshold for suspension protects the institution even when criminal proceedings are uncertain. The vote is called. 31-19, the attainder motion passes. Lucius Malfoy's Wizengamot seat is suspended pending full criminal inquiry. His house standing is conditionally maintained. The attainder provision does not strip house status on the first motion, only on conviction, because the framers also understood proportionality. He rises from his bench. He does not look at his solicitors. He looks for a long moment at Harry and then at Hermione, and his expression is the expression of a man who has just understood that the game he has been playing for 20 years has been replaced by a different game while he was still playing the old one. He leaves the chamber. The next motion is filed 3 weeks later. Draco Malfoy approaches them in November. Not in the Wizengamot. At Hogwarts, in the corridor outside the library, on a Thursday afternoon, at a time she has not scheduled and therefore notes as deliberate, he chose a time when she would be moving between locations, not stationary in a defensible context, which tells her something about the care he has put into the approach. He does not apologize. She has thought about what an apology from Draco Malfoy would mean, and has concluded it would mean less than what he actually does, which is stand in the corridor with the specific rigidity of a person suppressing a great deal and say, I have information about what he's planning for the ministry takeover. Specific information, dates, methods, which departments first. I want to give it to you. She looks at him. He holds the look. Why, she says. Because my father just lost his Wizengamot seat and his protection, and you did that, and I want to understand which side of this I'm on before it becomes impossible to choose. She thinks of what she said to Harry in year 3, on the last evening of August, at the kitchen table in Grimmauld Place. The most threatening thing that can exist to people who have invested everything in a binary is a third option. She thinks of it because Draco Malfoy is, in this corridor, looking for the third option. He is not repentant. He is strategic. He is calculating his position with the same intelligence that has always been there, just previously pointed at the wrong targets. I don't need your loyalty, she says. I don't need your remorse. I need the information to be accurate, and I need you to understand that I will verify everything you give me through independent channels before I act on it, and if anything you give me is designed to mislead, I will know, and the consequences of that will be severe and precisely documented. Draco looks at her. You sound like Snape. I take that as a structural compliment. She holds his gaze. Do you understand the conditions? Yes. It is specific, detailed, and consistent with 3 other intelligence threads she is already running. She files it in her notation system under Malfoy, D, unverified, and begins the verification process that afternoon. It verifies completely within 9 days. She moves it to Malfoy, D confirmed, and begins building the ministry preemption file. Snape is a different problem. She has known he is a double agent since year 4, not suspected, known in the same way she knew about Quirrell in year 1, through the patient accumulation of anomalies that individually mean nothing and collectively mean one clear thing. His behavioral pattern is inconsistent with simple Death Eater loyalty. His protection of Harry in year 1, his role in Sirius's acquittal, his specific quality of hatred toward Harry that has always contained something more complicated than straightforward contempt. These are the observations of someone who has been watching closely and has learned to read the difference between a person performing a role and a person being themselves. She does not trust him. She has never trusted him. But she has also, since year 4, been using his information the way she uses Draco's, through the verification channel, treating him as a source rather than an ally, because sources and allies are different relationships with different reliability requirements. In November, she requests a private meeting. He grants it. This itself is data. He grants it immediately, without the theater of reluctance that characterizes his interactions with Harry, which tells her that in a context where Harry is not present, Snape's performance requirements change. She goes to his office. She sits down without being invited to sit. She places her verified intelligence file on his desk. Not the full file, a summary, specific enough to demonstrate the depth of what she has built, but not so complete that it reveals all her sources. "I know what you are," she says. "I have known since year 4. I have not told anyone who would act on it precipitously." She pauses. "I am telling you now because we are entering the phase of this where your position becomes untenable unless you make an explicit choice. And I would rather you make that choice with full information than be forced into a decision under circumstances designed to remove your agency." Snape looks at her for a long moment. "You are 17 years old," he says. "Yes? And you are telling me you have been managing intelligence about my operational status since year 4. Managing, monitoring, and keeping it out of channels that would have had you killed before you were useful." She meets his eyes directly, "Which I would prefer to continue doing. But I need to know that the information flow is reciprocal. Not loyalty. I am not asking for loyalty. I am asking for verified intelligence exchange under the same conditions I apply to every other source." "What is your verification method?" he says. "Independent corroboration through at least 2 separate channels before action. Everything you give me goes through the same process as everything I receive from any source. If you give me something false, I will know. If you give me something true, I will use it and you will never know exactly how." She pauses. "Those are the terms. They are the same terms I offer everyone." At the notation on the cover page, which is dense and precise, and which he reads with the attention of a man who understands that he is looking at the work of someone who has been doing this for 3 years, and is very good at it. "Acceptable," he says. "The political infrastructure of Voldemort's ministry takeover plan dismantles across November and December in the specific way that architectures dismantle when you remove the load-bearing elements first. Not collapse, redistribution, the weight transferring to remaining elements, those elements bending under loads they were not designed for. Small failures propagating upward through the structure. By December, 4 of his 11 Wizengamot allies have lost their seats. 3 others have voluntarily reduced their political activity, not converted, not turned, simply recognizing that the exposure risk has increased beyond their personal threshold. The ministry's senior appointment pipeline, which Voldemort has been quietly seeding with sympathetic candidates for 3 years, has been disrupted by Ron's Provisional Governance Council work, which has been surfacing alternative candidates with the specific efficiency of a man who understands organizational dynamics and has been preparing this for 2 years. Voldemort is watching the Wizengamot being stripped of his influence through its own mechanisms. He intended to take over a functioning institution. What he is finding is that the institution's most useful components, the legal architecture, the ancient house standing, the procedural channels, are being turned against his allies with a systematic precision that he cannot easily counter without revealing his hand. He accelerates. Harry receives the intelligence from 3 separate sources in the same week: Draco, Snape, and a contact in the Aurora office that Ron developed through the Provisional Governance Council work. All 3 confirm the same information. The attack on the ministry is being moved forward. Spring, not summer. He puts the intelligence on the table at Grimmauld Place on a Friday evening in December and looks at Hermione and Ron. "He's coming," Harry says. "We know," Hermione says. "Are we ready?" At the network map, the capability matrix, the gap analysis he has been updating monthly since August, he looks at it with the specific assessment of someone who built a thing and has watched it develop beyond what he initially planned for, and is now taking a final, honest inventory of what it can bear. "Not everything is ready," he says. "It never will be, but enough is." He closes the notebook. "We're enough." Hermione looks at the frequency maps on the wall. 5 Horcruxes dissolved, Nagini remaining, 1 mortal Dark Lord with a collapsing political infrastructure and an accelerating timeline. 3 people at a kitchen table who have been building toward this for 6 years. She picks up her quill. She opens the operational planning file to the final section, the one she has been building since the extraction, the one labeled in her precise handwriting, Final Engagement, Preemption, and Containment. She writes the date at the top of the first page. The work is almost done, not finished. Almost. There is a difference, and she has always known the difference, and she holds it now in both hands like the thing it is. The castle has been awake since midnight. not in the way a castle wakes during a storm, or during a celebration, or during any of the ordinary forms of alarm that a building learns to hold after 1,000 years of occupation. This is different. The enchantments in the walls, the Founder-era protections, the gray architecture that Hermione mapped in year 3 and has been working within ever since, are responding to something they recognize, something they were built to recognize. The stones of Hogwarts have been waiting for this specific configuration of threat and readiness for a very long time, and now that it has arrived, the building does what very old things do when the moment they were made for finally comes. It holds. The intelligence arrived on April 30th through all 3 channels simultaneously. Draco, Snape, and Ron's Provisional Council contact, which is what simultaneous confirmation looks like when an operation has reached the point of no longer being concealable. Voldemort's timeline had been moved and moved again, and moved a final time by the systematic destruction of his political infrastructure, and what remained of his patience had reached its end. He was coming to Hogwarts because Hogwarts was the last fortified position of organized resistance. Because Dumbledore was here. Because, in his calculation, the symbolic destruction of the school that produced his enemies was worth the exposure risk. He had made this calculation without full accounting for what Hogwarts currently contained. The evacuation of students below 5th year was completed by 2 in the morning. Ron managed this, not Harry, not Hermione, not Dumbledore. Ron moving through dormitories with the calm authority of someone who has been preparing for exactly this contingency since year 6, his notebook open, his network activated, every communication chain he spent 2 years building running simultaneously. 43 students of the DA network held positions throughout the castle. Prefects, trained through the Sovereign Cohort's supplementary program, managed their houses with a competence that several heads of house would later describe as extraordinary. At 3 in the morning, Ron found Harry and Hermione in the entrance hall and said, "Everyone below 5th year is out. The castle is yours." Then he turned and went back up the stairs to the position he had assigned himself. The central coordination point, the 3rd-floor intersection that gave sightlines to 4 major corridors and access to 2 secondary stairwells, and did not ask permission because he had not needed permission since August. Voldemort arrives at the castle perimeter at 4:37 in the morning. He comes with 31 Death Eaters. He comes with creatures, giants provided by what remains of his non-human alliances, 3 of them massive and cold-eyed and directed toward the castle's outer walls. He comes with the specific confidence of a man who has spent 2 years recalibrating and has concluded that what he is walking toward is a school, and schools fall. What he encounters first is the ward line. The ward line is Hermione's work, built over 3 months, inscribed in the grounds around Hogwarts in a runic array that extends the castle's own Founder-era protections and adds 3 layers of her own design on top of them. It is not a wall. It is a system, responsive, adaptive, calibrated to recognize the magical signatures of everyone who is supposed to be inside it and to treat everything else as threat. It is the most complex single piece of work she has ever produced, and she has verified every line of it twice. The Death Eaters hit the ward line at 4:39. The first 3 who attempt to breach it are repelled without warning, thrown backward with the specific force of a system that was designed to not give warning because warnings give time to prepare countermeasures. The next 7 attempt a coordinated breach at a single point, the standard doctrine for overwhelming a ward perimeter, and find that the system distributes force rather than concentrating it, the way water distributes pressure. The breach point holds and the force is redirected outward along the ward's full perimeter, which generates a counter-pressure that the coordinated group cannot sustain. Voldemort himself does not attempt the ward line immediately. He stands at the perimeter, and he looks at it and he is quiet for a long time. He can feel the gray frequency in it. He has no name for what he is feeling. The gray tradition is 500 years dormant, and he was educated in the light-dark binary as thoroughly as anyone. But he can feel that what is in the ward line is not light magic and not dark magic. It is something older than the distinction, something that his magical signature, which is constitutionally dark, does not have a framework to engage with cleanly. He takes the ward apart. Eventually, it takes him 40 minutes, which is 40 minutes he did not plan for, and the effort costs him more than he anticipated, which is information he files with the specific focus of a man who has been accumulating information about the sovereign field for 3 years, and is still finding that its practical applications exceed his models. He enters the grounds at 5:22. He is 19 minutes behind the schedule his Death Eaters were given. Those 19 minutes have been used. The battle inside the castle is not the battle of a school in chaos. It is the battle of a fortified position defended by people who know every corridor, every stairwell, every room, who have been trained by 2 years of DA practice and 6 months of specific engagement preparation, who are operating under a communication system Ron built to be resilient against exactly the conditions currently present. The Death Eaters who breach the entrance hall find it held by a defensive line of 7th-year DA, members who are using a coordinated shield rotation that Hermione designed and that Flitwick, when he reviewed it in April, described as beyond any shielding methodology in the current academic curriculum. 3 Death Eaters are disarmed in the first 90 seconds. 2 more are contained by Neville Longbottom, who has spent 6 months developing combat applications of his wandless herbology magic and has been waiting with the specific patience of someone who knows exactly what they are going to do when the moment arrives. The vines that come through the entrance hall's stone floor move with intent, not random, not scattered, precise, targeted, wrapping wand arms, pinning legs to the floor. Neville does not look heroic doing this. He looks like someone doing a job they are very good at and have been prepared for, which is more useful than heroic. Nagini comes through the east wing at 5:45. The snake is 12 feet long and moves with the specific purposeful intelligence of a creature that has been Voldemort's closest instrument for 20 years. She is the last Horcrux. She is also, Hermione has noted in her operational planning, the Horcrux that is most aware of its own nature, not conscious of it in the way a human would be conscious, but operating with the instinctive self-preservation of something that knows, at the level of embedded magical instruction, that it must survive. Neville is in the East Wing because Ron put him there, not as a primary combatant, as the designated Nagini contingency, a role Neville was briefed on in April, a role he accepted with the quiet seriousness that has characterized everything he has done since he discovered in Year 5's DA sessions that he was more capable than anyone had told him he was. He has Gryffindor's sword. It came to him in a room of requirement session in March, materialized from the sorting hat with the same logic it has always operated on. Need, genuine need, and the character to justify the need, and he has been training with it since, not as a weapon exactly, as an extension of the same principle that governs his wandless magic, intent made physical, will given an instrument. Nagini finds him in the east corridor and rears, and Neville looks at her with the expression he has been constructing since he understood what she is, and he says without dramatics, "I know what you are. I'm sorry for what was done to you, but I can't let you live." The sword finds its angle. Nagini falls. The last Horcrux ends not with ceremony, but with a boy who grew up being told he was ordinary, standing in a corridor and doing what needed to be done. Harry and Hermione find Voldemort in the grounds at 6 in the morning. He is standing in the open, which tells her something. He is done with approach, done with strategy, done with the long game that the last 20 years of his existence has been. He has lost his Horcruxes, lost his political infrastructure, lost his timetable, and his patience and the specific strategic patience that has always been his greatest capability. What remains is power and will, and the specific fury of a man who has discovered that the future he made himself immortal to inhabit is not available to him. He is still the most powerful dark wizard alive. This is a real fact. She has never permitted herself to underestimate it, and she does not underestimate it now. He looks at Harry first, then at her. His red eyes move between them with the quality of assessment she recognizes from every significant opponent she has studied. The rapid recalibration of a mind that is taking in the reality of what is in front of it and discarding earlier models. "You destroyed them," he says. His voice is what it always is, cold, precise. The voice of someone who removed everything from themselves that was not useful and discovered that what remained was insufficient for the thing they had been trying to make. "Yes," Harry says, "all of them, all of them." A silence. Voldemort raises the Elder Wand. The curse is not Avada Kedavra. He does not use the killing curse on Harry Potter. He has not used it on Harry Potter since the graveyard, since the rebound that should have killed him and did not, and the Elder Wand's specific awareness of its own mastery makes the curse's trajectory in his hand uncertain in ways he is not willing to risk. He uses something else instead, a compound curse from a tradition older than the killing curse itself, a curse Hermione has no name for, designed not to kill but to unmake, to strip a wizard's magical core from the inside, to leave a living body with nothing inside it that matters. The sovereign field activates, not gradually, not as a response to intent, before before the curse fully leaves the wand. The field reads the dark frequency of what is incoming and generates the counter-response with the automatic speed of a system that has been running and calibrating and building its counter-frequency map for 6 years. The curse disperses, not reflected. Dispersed, the frequency inversion that Hermione first designed to extract the Horcrux from Harry's scar, applied at field scale, encounters the curse's dark frequency and unmakes it. There is a sound like a note played at the precise wrong pitch for the instrument producing it, and then the curse is gone, and the air where it traveled is simply air. Voldemort is very still. She knows what he is feeling because she built the detection system that can read the field effects of a magical response, and what she reads in the ambient magic around him in this moment is not anger. It is recognition, the specific quality of a very intelligent mind encountering something it cannot engage with on its own terms, and knowing, immediately, that this is what losing looks like. He tries again, twice, 3 times, different curses, different approaches, adjusting his frequency with the technical mastery of someone who has spent 70 years understanding dark magic at the deepest level. Each attempt disperses, the field adapts faster than he can recalibrate. It has 6 years of his signature in its detection system, 6 years of every probe and assault and attempted intrusion he has directed at Harry's scar, and it knows him the way a key knows a lock. He is the most powerful dark wizard alive. He is trying to fight a system that was built specifically to counter everything he is. He closes on them physically, because physical proximity is a different problem. The field has range, not infinity. And at very close range the dynamic changes, the advantage of the counter-frequency system reducing as the engagement becomes immediate. He is a duelist of extraordinary capability. He has been a duelist since before either of them was born. They are not 2 individual duelists. Harry moves left, Hermione moves right. The synchronization is not choreographed. It is the product of 6 years of moving together until movement together has become the default, the way 2 people who have worked in the same space for long enough begin to navigate that space with an awareness of each other that operates below conscious decision-making. He attacks in the way Harry attacks, full, aggressive, drawing attention, the raw power that has always been his defining characteristic, now operating without the Horcrux's interference for the first time, clean and complete. She works the angles. Not in the way that looks like combat, in the way that looks like arithmetic made physical, the identification of the precise point in Voldemort's defensive sequence where a specific frequency application will do the most structural damage. She is not trying to overpower him. She is trying to find the right note. She finds it at 6:14 in the morning. The full dissolution, she wrote the theory for it in year 7. Built it from the gray magic framework Sirius taught them in year 3, extended through the extraction methodology she developed for Harry's Horcrux, scaled to the application of a standing wave against a complete magical signature rather than an embedded fragment. It requires 3 conditions: the target's complete magical signature in the field's detection system, sufficient field intensity to sustain the standing wave, and a target whose magical core is constitutionally self-consuming, held together by dark magic that is, at its deepest level, entropy dominant. Voldemort's core is all 3 things. She speaks the incantation. Harry hears it. He knows what it means. He does not fall back. He presses forward, keeps Voldemort's attention on the immediate physical threat, because she needs 3 seconds of him not directing his full awareness toward her, and Harry gives her 3 seconds, with everything he has. The standing wave engages. What happens next takes 11 seconds. Voldemort feels it before he understands it. The field's frequency engaging his core at the precise counterpitch, the self-consuming architecture of what he has made himself responding to the standing wave the way a flame responds to the removal of its oxygen source. Not smothered, deprived. The dark magic holding him together encountering a frequency it cannot exist in the presence of, and the reaction propagating inward from the edges of his core toward the center. He turns toward her, in his face, in that moment, something she did not expect. Not rage, not contempt. Clarity, the specific clarity of a very intelligent person who has just understood exactly what is happening to them and cannot prevent it. He looks at Harry. "You were supposed to die," he says, and his voice has lost the cold precision. What is underneath it is not grief. It is the older thing, the thing that was Tom Riddle's before Tom Riddle decided it was a liability and began removing it. The voice of someone who chose to be alone at every available opportunity and is only now, at the end, understanding the specific cost of that choice. Harry looks at him. "I know," he says. "There is no triumph in it, only the weight of everything that led here. the dissolution completes. Tom Riddle, born December 31st, 1926, dies in the grounds of Hogwarts School on a May morning, 68 years after he sat in its entrance hall as an 11-year-old and was sorted into a house he spent the rest of his life dishonoring. He does not fall dramatically. He does not rage. He becomes, for one moment, simply a man, old and tired, and finished, and then he is gone, not killed. Completed, the entropy that his own magic represented turned finally inward, the work undone at the root. The grounds are quiet. The castle's enchantments, which have been running at maximum intensity since 4:37 this morning, settle, not deactivate, settle the way a building settles after the storm that was testing it passes, finding its new baseline, which is different from the old one. Harry stands in the May morning with the specific quality of a person who has been carrying something for 17 years and has just set it down and is still feeling the absence of the weight. He does not speak for a long time. Hermione is beside him. Her notation journal is not in her hand. She is not writing anything. She is simply present, in the way that the field is present. Not demonstrative, not loud, just structurally there. The castle doors open. Ron is in the doorway. He looks at them, at the empty ground between them and the castle wall, and he reads the situation with the spatial intelligence that has always been his particular capability. He nods once. They nod back. Inside, the hall is filling with the living. Survivors, coming out of corridors and rooms in the positions they held through the night, assembling in the way that people assemble after something enormous has ended, slowly, carefully, not yet certain that the enormous thing is really finished. Neville Longbottom is sitting on the entrance hall steps with the sword across his knees, and the expression of someone who did what they needed to do and is now in the first minutes of understanding what it cost. Luna is beside him, not speaking, which is what he needs. Ginny moves through the hall with the efficiency of someone who has identified who is injured and is organizing care, which is what she has been doing since year 6 and what she will do for the rest of her career. Cedric Diggory, alive because of a portkey and a fraction of a second and 4 years of preparation, is helping carry a stretcher with the specific quality of someone who knows they survived something they should not have and has decided to spend the rest of their life justifying the survival. McGonagall stands in the center of the hall. She looks at Harry and Hermione when they enter. Her expression does not change. McGonagall's expressions are not the kind that change easily in public, but something in her posture does. The specific release of a tension that has been there since September of 1991, when a sorting hat spoke to a hall full of children and told them that something unprecedented had arrived in their school. She nods at them. They nod at her. The morning is full of what mornings after things like this are full of: grief and relief, and the long work of accounting for everyone and beginning to understand the shape of what the world is now. The war is over. The world is not fixed. It is never simply fixed. There are systems to rebuild and laws to rewrite, and a generation of children who grew up in the shadow of this and will need to be shown that the shadow is gone. There are people who will need convincing, and people who will resist, and an institution that will require years of sustained pressure before it reflects what it should reflect. All of that is true. It is also true that Tom Riddle is gone, and the morning is real, and the castle is standing, and everyone who was supposed to survive this did. Harry sits down on the entrance hall steps. Hermione sits beside him. They do not speak for a while. When they do, it is Hermione who speaks first, and what she says is not about the battle or the dissolution or the 6 years of work that led here. What she says is, "I need to write to my parents." Harry looks at her. "They've been worried," she says. He nods. He thinks of the Grangers, their kitchen, the phone call from the leaky cauldron in year 1, the guest room, the dinners, the way Helen Granger put food on the table without needing to understand everything that was happening to understand that the people at her table needed feeding. "Tell them it's over," he says. "Yes," she says. The morning light comes through the entrance hall doors, which are open, the castle breathing in the May air the way it always breathes in the first days of summer, because that is what it does, what it has always done, and what it will keep doing now. October 1998. 5 months later, the Wisengamot chamber looks the same as it always has. Same stone, same tiered benches, same horseshoe arrangement that forces every member to be visible to every other member. The portraits on the upper walls are the same portraits, former chief warlocks, former ministers, centuries of accumulated institutional authority rendered in oil paint and gold frames. Harry and Hermione walk in wearing their school robes. They have just finished their new teas. Yesterday, Harry's results were delivered by owl this morning, outstanding in defense, charms, transfiguration, and care of magical creatures. Hermione's results were also delivered this morning and contain 11 outstandings and a single exceeds expectations in astronomy, which she has noted in her journal as a statistical inevitability given the subject's observational methodology. The sky does not repeat itself on examination schedule, and certainty in a discipline that depends on celestial positioning requires a tolerance for variables she finds professionally uncomfortable. She has the document under her arm. 30 pages. 6 months of drafting, 4 rounds of revision, reviewed by Sirius, by Alderton, by Lupin, by McGonagall, by Amelia Bones, who has been acting minister since Scrimgeour's resignation in July, by Neville's grandmother Augusta Longbottom, who is 72 years old and holds 2 Wizengamot seats, and whose support was not available until Hermione had a 4-hour conversation with her in September that covered every structural objection Augusta had raised over 3 previous meetings. The document has a title, The Foundations Act. They take their seats in the Ancient Houses section, the chamber fills, 50 members, every seat occupied, mandatory attendance for emergency sessions, which this is, called by Lord Potterblack under his standing right as head of an ancient house. The gallery is full, press observers, family members, 3 goblins from Gringotts attending as formal witnesses, which has not happened in the history of the current ministry building and which required a procedural resolution that Alderton handled on Wednesday. Iron Scale is in the center of the goblin delegation. He is wearing, Hermione notes, his best hat. Dumbledore is present. He is not Chief Warlock. He stepped down from that position in August. Quietly, in a letter to the Wizengamot that was characteristically graceful and characteristically incomplete in its accounting of why. He sits in the gallery. He has his half-moon spectacles on and his hands folded in his lap, and he watches the chamber with the expression of a man who has made peace with a future he did not design. Harry distributes copies of the Foundations Act. Every member receives one. The room is quiet in the specific way rooms are quiet when 50 people are all reading the same document, and each of them is calculating what it means for them personally before they have finished calculating what it means structurally. Harry stands. Members of the Wizengamot, he begins. His voice is level and carries without performance. I present the Foundations Act, a comprehensive reform of magical Britain's legal, educational, and social structures. I ask that you read it carefully. Then I ask that you pass it. Hermione does not look at him. She is watching the room, reading faces, tracking the specific quality of attention each member is bringing to the document. She has mapped this chamber for 3 years. She knows which members will object on ideological grounds and which on procedural grounds, and which are calculating political cost before they have read past the second page. She has prepared for all of them. The debate lasts 6 hours. Article 1, mandatory Muggle studies, expanded to all 7 years, with a practical integration curriculum, draws objections from 8 members on the grounds of tradition, institutional burden, and 2 arguments that are sophisticated enough to require her to reference the specific pages of her supporting documentation that address them. She has the pages marked. She provides the references without standing up, passing notes to Alderton, who relays them through procedural channels, because the rules of Wizengamot debate are specific about who may speak and when. The vote, 32 to 18. Article 1 passes. Article 2, the Gringotts Accord, formalizing goblin legal personhood and establishing co-equal standing in financial and inheritance law, draws the most sustained objection. 11 members speak against it. The arguments range from the principled to the transparently self-interested, and Hermione listens to all of them with the same quality of attention, the same notation in her journal, the same precise tracking of which objections are based on genuine concern about implementation and which are based on the speaker's vault balance. Iron Scale in the gallery is very still throughout the debate. He does not react, he watches. The vote, 38 to 12. Article 2 passes. Harry looks at Iron Scale when the result is announced. Iron Scale looks back. Nothing is said. Nothing needs to be said. Article 3. The Ancient Magic Curriculum Expansion, Wandless Magic as a formal elective, Runic Craft as a Newt-level program, Magical Heritage as a mandatory first-year course. Passes 41 to 9, which is the largest margin of the session. McGonagall, watching from the gallery, allows herself a small, precise nod. Article 4. Blood Status Registry Abolition is the one Hermione has spent the most time on, not because it is the most legally complex, but because it is the most emotionally loaded, and emotionally loaded arguments require a different kind of preparation than legal ones. You cannot footnote a feeling. You can only demonstrate, through the quality of your evidence and the precision of your framing, that the alternative to this change is a system that has already produced its consequences, and that those consequences are documented, specific, and not acceptable. She has documented them. They are specific. They fill 12 of the 30 pages. The vote 29 to 21, Article 4 passes. The margin is the smallest of the session. She writes it in her journal and does not editorialize. Article 5, the Azkaban Review, the Dementor contract not renewed, the prison converted to human guards and ministry standard conditions within 5 years, is the last. The debate runs longest on this one. 4 members who voted for every previous article vote against this one, and she understands why. Dementors are in institutions, and institutions have constituencies. And the constituencies of this particular institution include people who believe that certain categories of prisoner deserve their suffering. Sirius is in the gallery. He sits in the front row of the gallery, which he has occupied since the session opened, in the formal robes of House Black. He has not moved for 6 hours. His expression has been the expression of a man maintaining perfect stillness through the exercise of considerable will, and it has not broken during any previous vote, and it does not break now as the tally is called. 26 to 23, 1 abstention. 1 abstention, which is Sirius himself, because he recused from this vote in advance on the grounds that he could not be objective, and because it was Hermione who suggested the recusal, and he understood immediately that she was right. Article 5 passes. The Foundations Act passes. All 5 articles. Harry does not stand. He does not give a speech. He nods to the chamber, picks up the draft copy of the act, covered in Hermione's annotations in 3 ink colors, the visible record of 6 months of thinking, and walks out. The corridor outside the Wizengamot chamber is institutional stone and institutional lighting, and Hermione is already there when he comes through the door, because she left the chamber 30 seconds before the final announcement, which is a thing she can do because she knows how to count votes in real time, and she knew the final tally before the clerk finished reading it. Ron is there. He arrived from the Provisional Governance Council offices 3 floors up, which is where he has been working since September, and he is holding sandwiches, which is the most Ron thing that has ever happened, and which means more than a speech would mean. Sirius is there, coming through the door behind Harry, and his face has finally released the stillness he has been holding for 6 hours. He looks like a man who has just put down something very heavy and is standing in the feeling of its absence. Lupin is there, with Tonks beside him, their son Teddy asleep against Tonks's shoulder, with the absolute commitment to unconsciousness that characterizes very small children. Neville is there, Ginny is there, Luna is there carrying something in a jar that she sets down carefully on the floor beside her, and nobody asks what it is. They sit on the floor of the ministry corridor. They eat the sandwiches. The rebuilding is not fast. It is never fast. The Foundations Act passes in October, and the world does not change in November. What changes is the legal architecture, the foundational structure, and the foundational structure is where change has to start before it can reach the surface. Harry and Hermione proposed the Hogwarts redesignation to the Wizengamot in December. The school formally redesignated as a neutral institution, not affiliated with any political faction, not under ministry oversight, governed by an independent board. McGonagall is headmistress. The sovereign duo hold 2 permanent board seats. The argument Hermione makes in support of the motion is 4 minutes long and references the school's founding documents, the founder-era Grey tradition, and a single sentence from Hogwarts, a history that she has been waiting since year 1 to use in precisely this context. The motion passes without a formal vote. Unanimous consent, which is the Wizengamot's mechanism for recording that an outcome is beyond reasonable objection. The curriculum reform follows. The house system is not abolished. They are pragmatic about institutional change, both of them, in the way that people are pragmatic when they have spent 6 years working within institutions, rather than against them. Identity structures that have existed for 1,000 years cannot simply be removed without leaving a vacuum, and vacuums fill with things you did not choose. What they add is a 5th track, the sovereign designation, for students who manifest advanced interwizardly resonance, or who elect to study Grey tradition alongside their house curriculum, or who simply want to learn magic in a framework that predates the light/dark binary. It is not mandatory. It is not prestigious in the way that the 4 houses are prestigious. In the first year, 11 students apply. Hermione teaches the theory, Harry teaches the practice. They agree on the train back from London in January, spectacularly underqualified for this, and the only people alive who can do it, which is the condition they have operated in since they were 11 years old, and have never found particularly paralyzing. Ron visits in February, uninvited as always, with news from the Provisional Governance Council that he knows they need and will not ask for, delivered over dinner at the long table in Grimmauld Place that Sirius has painted yellow and covered with photographs. The photographs are everywhere now, the walls, the mantel, the surfaces that used to hold only the artifacts of a family that valued blood over everything else. James and Lily, the Marauders, Harry at 7, learning to fly on a toy broomstick, Hermione at 9, sitting in the library with a stack of books that is taller than she is and an expression of complete satisfaction. Ron at 11, on the Hogwarts Express, with the particular look of a boy who has just sat down next to something interesting and decided to stay. Sirius moves through this house differently than he moved through it in year 1. Not quickly, not in straight lines. He touches things, he opens windows. He has repainted every room except the entrance hall, and the entrance hall he has left because the portrait of Walburga Black still hangs there, mouth still moving, sound still absent. And he has decided that leaving it there is a more accurate account of where this family came from than removing it would be. Tujour's purr is still on the tapestry. He has not removed it. Beneath it, in new gold thread that he added himself over 3 evenings in August, are 3 words he spent a long time choosing: pure of purpose. The first September after the war, the sorting of a new class, Harry and Hermione sit at the staff table as instructors, which still requires a specific internal adjustment every time they enter the hall in that capacity. The first years file in. They are small and uncertain and carrying the specific energy of children who know the war is over, but have grown up in its shadow and are only now beginning to understand what a world without the shadow might be. The Sorting Hat sings its new song. It does not invoke the 4 houses' founding rivalry. It does not tell the old story of division and competition. It sings about balance, about the space between opposites, about the magic that exists in the meeting of different things rather than their separation. The song is shorter than the traditional one and considerably harder to summarize, which several students will note in letters home. At the end of the song, the hat adds 3 lines. They are not in the prior repertoire. 3 portraits and 1 century-old ghost will confirm this afterward, independently, because Hermione asked them to be present specifically to document it. 2 came as 1, and the old division fell. What magic proclaimed, history will tell. The sovereign holds, and the school holds well. The hall is quiet for a moment, then the sorting begins, and the first child walks forward, and the hat descends and Hogwarts continues. Hermione's hand finds Harry's on the table. Not a declaration, not a resonance activation, not a field deployment. The contact of 2 people who have been holding the same thing for 7 years in a place where holding it is finally allowed to be quiet. He does not look at her, she does not look at him. They watch the hall together, the first years and the 4 houses and the floating candles and the enchanted ceiling that is doing exactly what it has always done, tracking the real sky above the valley, the stars visible between October clouds, the light of 100 candles caught in 400 young faces. The sovereign field is present, it is always present, but it is quiet in the way that foundations are quiet, not absent, not dormant, simply doing what it was built to do, without requiring attention, holding the weight of everything built on top of it. This is what they built. Not the end of evil, which is not a thing that ends. It recedes and must be pushed back again, and will require pushing back in every generation by people who will have to find their own reasons to do it, and their own tools and their own partnerships. What they built is the tools, the legal architecture, the curriculum, the record, the precedent that power used with precision and restraint and full accountability to the people it affects is different from power used for its own perpetuation. The proof, demonstrated across 7 years in front of a school, and a Wizengamot, and a war, that the binary was never the only option. Dumbledore is in the gallery tonight. He attends every sorting now, not as chief warlock or as headmaster, but simply as someone who loves this school and has decided that love is sufficient justification for presence. He watches the hall with the expression of a man who has lived long enough to watch the future he did not design arrive and has found it better than the one he planned. He looks at Harry and Hermione at the staff table. They do not see him looking. They are watching the hall. He looks for a long time. Then the first year sits on the stool, and the hat descends, and the old building holds them all, and the story that began here 7 years ago, with every candle guttering and a voice that spoke to stone and foundation rather than people, continues, in the only way any story continues, not by ending, but by becoming the ground that the next story stands on. The sovereign holds. The school holds well. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.